Okay, I believe we are live. I'm going to tweet out this link. Hey, everybody. I'm here with my buddy Airman, also known as No More Politics. On Twitter, I will tweet out video. Hold on. Can you tell I suck at this? How's it going, Airman?
It's going good. It's going good, man. Thanks for inviting me.
No problem. The reason why I wanted to talk to you is because you're originally from. I think you probably will have interesting things to say, but you are from the Balkans originally, which is a region I don't know much about, but I'm interested in learning more.
Mm-hmm.
So why don't you tell us about your past real quick?
Yeah, so I was born in Yugoslavia, which was then Yugoslavia, in the 80s. And yeah, which is present day now Bosnia. I was
Okay.
born in like northwestern part of Bosnia. And then when however you decide to phrase it, some people phrase it aggression on Bosnia, some people call it a civil war in Bosnia. Anyways, the breakup of Yugoslavia, we arrived to Canada in early 92, and I've been here ever since. So yeah.
Gotcha. Yeah, I've read one book on the breakup of Yugoslavia, and it's the reputation the Balkans has. It's got all these different ethnic groups that just hate each other inherently. But
Mhm.
according to this book, it's like that wasn't necessarily the case. People lived alongside each other quite peacefully for a long time, and then things really, I don't know, went to shit, I guess you could say, in the 90s. But yeah, and there was an active genocide against the Bosnian people by the Serbians, correct?
Yeah, I mean, I would agree with that. Maybe some people would disagree with that, but yeah, there's basically in Bosnia, sort of when Yugoslavia was breaking up, the main area that had the most violence and destruction was Bosnia, and the reason for that is because Bosnia does have three main ethnic groups: Serbs, Croats, and Bosniaks. Bosniaks are essentially Bosnian Muslims.
Mm-hmm.
Um, they're referred to as Bosniaks, but I would fall into that group. The really how that happens is all three groups are white, which
Right.
might be shocking to some people. But so the Ottomans came into the Balkans in around 1300s, late 1300s, and they brought Islam to the Balkans. Of course, this is also debatable. Did the Ottomans convert people, pressure them to convert, or was it just that people did it on their own? That's something else that people debate. But nevertheless, that's how Islam is brought into the Balkans, and that's why you have a group of white people like myself that are technically born into that. But I'm agnostic. My family, I would say 70% of Bosnian Muslims are not really religious. They drink, they eat pork. They're basically like all other Europeans. And then I would say there's probably 20 to 30% of Bosniaks or Bosnian Muslims that are more religious.
Okay.
So yeah, that's basically how I would put it. Yeah.
Yeah, I know that the country that was Yugoslavia was basically formerly part of the Ottoman Empire, as you said, but also formerly part of the Austro-Hungarian Empire.
Yeah,
And, and
exactly.
I suppose those obviously those lines shifted between each other, but yeah, I also read that during the fighting in like 1991 and 1992, the Bosnians brought in some jihadis to
Hmm.
help fight alongside them. And the
Yeah,
people there were like, what the fuck? These people are
yeah,
crazy.
yeah, yeah. Well, yeah, it did. Yeah, definitely. So the Bosniak side brought in definitely Mujahideen. Um, there was some support, I think, from Pakistan and Iran as well. You have to understand, though, that really Bosniaks or Bosnian Muslims were definitely, you know, uh, they didn't have as much firepower. So they were
Sure.
pretty desperate. At that time, Yugoslavia had the fourth best military in Europe.
Mm-hmm.
So, and who had control of that was really Serbs in Belgrade, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, being that the Bosniaks were very underhanded, I think, they went to those kinds of, that was really the only kind of solution that they had to not, because as you mentioned, there was a genocide against the Bosniak people in areas like Srebrenica. So yeah, I mean, I that's how I would explain it, anyways.
Gotcha. How old were you when you went to Canada?
I was 8.
Okay, so you were pretty young.
Yeah, I was pretty young. Yeah, my brother was like 12, and yeah, definitely though. I remember definitely snapshots of the war as well. So
Okay.
yeah.
Well, lucky you made it out alive. Have you gone back since?
I have, yeah.
Okay. To what extent do you still have ties with the area? Because what you're from an area that was or that is now Bosnia, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
What's the view of the United States there? And because that was the first time that NATO actually fired shots off was during the early on fighting in the
Yeah.
90s.
Yeah, so that's actually interesting because I would say the most favorable is from the Bosniaks or Bosnian Muslims, because I would say that's the group that would say that the U.S. for most part try to help and try to prevent a genocide. And yeah, I would say that they're the most favorable. I mean, due to what happened in '99, in Serbia, the Serbs are not all that big on the U.S. for most part, right?
Right.
Um,
They like Russia a lot better.
exactly. Yeah, very very close with Russia and Greece. Yeah, part of it is really that Bosniaks don't really have another home except Bosnia, and
Mm-hmm.
that's not really true for Serbs and Croats. So Serbs and Croats have ties to Bosnia, going back to the Bosnian kingdom, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, the kingdom of Bosnia fell in 1463 when the Ottomans took it over. And so Serbs and Croats have ties to Bosnia, and then Bosniaks do as well, but that's their only home. While, of course, Serbs have Serbia as well now, Croatia, Croats. So, yeah, like Bosniaks had no other really option. They had to fight for Bosnia. Yeah.
Gotcha. I don't know how much you paid attention to American culture in like the mid to late 90s, but for a long time, not for a long time, for that period of time, the bad guys in a lot of movies were Serbians.
Mm-hmm.
Just
Yeah.
because it was after the Cold War, but before 9/11, so they're like, Slobodan Milosevic, he's the baddie. So let's make the bad guys in this movie Serbian.
Yeah, I did notice. I didn't gotta tell you, I didn't hate it.
Yeah.
But yeah, but on my recent trip, I went 2 years ago, just before this whole COVID thing broke out. I was in Belgrade for 3 weeks. I don't I don't have anything against Serbs. I mean, the town that I'm from in Bosnia was 50% Serb and 50% Bosniak. So
Okay.
our neighbors, were close neighbors were Serbs, and so we don't, as you said, sort of the history of it that's painted of hate is obviously not totally true. I mean, people lived side by side and got along just fine. So yeah, I mean, there's a lot in common there, but yeah, I don't know. I'm sure we'll get there maybe about why the war broke out. Maybe we'll get to that, but I definitely, it's a lot of obviously identity stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Um, there's a lot of ethnic pride in being, Serbian or Croatian or Bosnian. And, like I remember a lot of Serbs, for example, saying that really Bosniaks are just Serbs who happen to be Muslim, right?
Mm-hmm.
And Croats would say a similar thing. Bosniaks are really just Croats who happen to be Muslim.
Aren't Croats Catholics?
They are, yeah.
Yeah, and then Serbs are Orthodox, right?
They're Orthodox, yeah.
Okay. Because I remember years ago reading Christopher Hitchens, and he obviously spent time down there during the war, and he said that there is no ethnic difference between Serbs and Croats, and ethnic differences between them, and it's largely just religious. But
exactly, I would say that for all three groups, really.
Right.
They're really, it's just religion changed over time, but they all come from similar Slavic tribe, if not the same. So,
okay.
Yeah.
Interesting. So why do you think the conflict broke out there after Yugoslavia fell apart?
Well, I mean, yeah, I mean, there's so many reasons, right? I mean, first, obviously, that area has been, fucked with, if we can use that word, for a long time by, different groups, obviously Ottomans, Austro-Hungarian Empire, as you mentioned. But yeah, there was always divisions over sort of particular identities, Serbian pride, Croatian pride, Bosnian, and later on, Bosniak pride. So, people get, a lot of meaning, a deep meaning based on those genetics and shared history and language and so forth, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's not this superficial identity that we see kind of today with this identity politics stuff, right? Kind of outward things like, what we're saying with the trans issue and all of that. That's I mean, I would say that. So there was, during that time, obviously, when Tito died, who was holding Yugoslavia sort of together, all that sort of broke out, that nationalism and ethnic pride, because during the time of Tito, who was holding Yugoslavia kind of together, that kind of stuff was not allowed, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it was, but that's the problem, like today, a lot of people talk about free speech and all the importance of free speech. And that is definitely one of the important parts of free speech is because that kind of stuff was sort of brewing, in people's heart, in people's heads. But they weren't allowed to come out with it. So finally, when Tito died, I think people kind of exploded. All that kind of came out flooding. And then just, different groups started jockeying to, their position, their side. And in a nutshell, I think that explains a lot of it for sure.
Interesting. Yeah, I had read that Tito really kept a lid on that stuff, nationalist movements, because he was, obviously Yugoslavia was a multi-ethnic state, and he was worried that if there was ethnic tension, that like the Soviet Union would invade, because they did that in the Czech Republic, or Czechoslovakia as it was at the time, and then they also did that in Hungary when tensions were boiling over there. And so that was really the primary incentive. And of course, Tito had the falling out with Soviet Union and really became an important leader in the non-alignment movement during the Cold War. Apparently I think I read they were the third largest arms exporter during the Cold War, right behind the United States and the Soviet Union, which is crazy. I didn't know that, but
yeah, that seems right. For sure.
Yeah. Gotcha. So, what was I going to ask you about this? Do you like it in Canada better? Like, do you plan on staying up there, or you want to go back one day?
I've been here for 30 years now.
Okay.
So since I was so, I mean, I still honestly do think about it from time to time, but Canada's okay, and it's brought a lot of good things to my life. So
sure,
you got to be appreciative for that, and I am. So I don't know. I do think about it from time to time, but I'm fairly happy here. Aside from Trudeau.
Yeah, I suppose. I mean, you've been there 30 years. Your life is up there, so
yeah, it is.
the thing about immigrating, it's like, I don't know. I've never had to move that far, but you're eventually, after so many generations, your identity becomes part of the new land. Like, I don't know what the ethnic enclaves are like in Canada, but I know in the United States, like, obviously there's still ethnic neighborhoods in major cities. Now they're more Hispanic than they used to be Eastern European and so on, but it's like still, and people speak their native languages, but as the generations go on, people become more and more integrated with the general population.
Yeah. I mean, definitely. Like when I was a teenager, I wasn't really a big fan necessarily of Canada, and I definitely thought a lot more about going back to the Balkans. And then as I sort of finished university here, got a job and all that kind of thing, definitely started to get more ingrained into it. I think it did also help though that sort of there isn't necessarily a huge Bosnian or Balkan community in my city here. So in some sense, it's easier to get ingrained. I do think those places, in Europe where you have sort of ghettos like that of different ethnic groups in one area is not necessarily, that beneficial or helpful to integrate people.
Sure.
Yeah.
Have you been following the news in there lately in the Balkans?
Yeah, I have. I do pay fairly close attention to it.
Sure. What is happening in Kosovo exactly?
Kosovo, yeah, that honestly, I don't know that much. I don't, I haven't focused too much on the Kosovo issue. Mostly
Gotcha.
just news specifically in Bosnia, more so than anything there.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you think Bosnia will become part of NATO?
That's gonna be tough. Just based on, I mean, the Bosnian government is kind of like it has three presidents,
Really?
one from each ethnic group, one
Oh,
Bosniak,
okay.
one Serb, one Croat, and they rotate
Huh.
like every 6 months or something for 4 years or something like that. Yeah, it's pretty crazy. I don't see how that's going to happen. How there's going to be agreement among all three groups for something like that to happen. I don't see how it can happen really otherwise. Um, so yeah, it's a horrible situation in terms of like the politics of how they work, in Bosnia.
Interesting.
Yeah,
So you're speaking of Canada,
yeah.
you're a pretty big Jordan Peterson fan, aren't you?
I am. Yeah.
Okay, what do you like about him exactly?
What do I like about him? Well, I think he's got like his psychological stuff, all the self help stuff that he's done, his book Maps of Meaning. Like his Maps of Meaning book. I don't know if you read that one or.
I have not.
Okay,
It's pretty
well,
hard to come by these days, isn't it? Because it's not in electronic form. It's just you have to get the actual book, right?
yeah, that might be the case. But yeah, you should try to pick it up. I mean, there's a lot to like about him. I mean, I'm not the only one that likes him, right? Like,
Yeah, he's quite popular.
yeah, he's very popular. I mean, his main thing is, I mean, Maps of Meaning. Like one of the main takeaways from that book is he talks about the fact that identity regulates our emotions, right? And he talks about the fact that when there's threats to our identity, uh, that's why people in large part are willing to pick up guns and put their life on the line, right?
Hmm. Okay.
So that's something that uh, you know struck a chord with me due to what I just explained to you about the Bosnian conflict. So for him to come from like a very academic background and have that kind of insight into that kind of stuff was one thing that definitely drew me to him. But yeah, he's got a lot of good self help things as well in his 12 Rules for Life
I
as
did
well.
read that one.
You did read that one, or?
Most of it was perfectly practical advice. Like,
Sure.
as
Yeah.
far as self-help books go, it was fine.
Yeah. Absolutely. So yeah, what is it like? What is the main problem that you have with him?
See, here's the thing. First of all, Chauncey Stewart gave us a super chat, 30 NT. I don't know what currency that is, but thank you. Which part of Canada is he living? I'm assuming he's referring to you.
Yes. Well, I'll say it's Ontario, so it's in sort of middle of Canada.
Gotcha. Cool. I don't see. Here's the thing. I don't really have a problem with Jordan Peterson necessarily. Years ago, when he was first on the Sam Harris podcast, that was my first exposure to him. And, when I listened to it at the time, I thought where he talked about truth and if it's useful, then it's true. That's my recollection of it. I'm not saying, this was years ago. I was like, this is a bunch of gobbledygook. And I have not seen anything that's changed my mind on that. Again, maybe if I revisited it today, I would feel differently. And then I remember talking about that and getting just like inundated with crazy fans of his. And that just kind of turned me off. If somebody's got a fan base that just goes insane, when they seem to have calmed down, by the way, but like there was an element with this fan base that was just hysterical. They did not like they didn't like criticism of him. And I thought, after I heard that stuff, I was just like, I don't know about this guy. But then I've listened to him talk before, and he does have some interesting things to say. And like I said, the 12 Rules for Life was perfectly fine self-help book. I've read several self-help books. I know that's dorky and kind of pathetic, but it is what it is.
Yes.
And but I never really felt the need to talk about him until I saw that Russia thing. So that's really where I took issue with him. And I know I sent that video to you. Did you happen to watch it?
Yeah, I did. Well, I know that you've mentioned quite a few times that you're not like a big fan of talking about like culture and stuff like that, which I mean, he spends a great deal of time talking about that. And obviously psychology, that's probably another non-interest of yours. So it's not surprising that you wouldn't necessarily get it of why there's this, appeal. I mean, I'm honestly in some ways surprised that many Western people can kind of appreciate some of the things that he's saying anyways. For some reason, I get the sense it's easier maybe from people from Eastern Europe to get some of the things he's saying. But yeah, I remember you. I did watch it, and yeah, I can't disagree with you. I mean, it has absolutely nothing. What he said has absolutely nothing to do with the conflict in Ukraine, between Ukraine and Russia. I mean, the fact that it has something with what's going on in Western society and the trans stuff and all that. I mean, that's total BS. But you see, why do you think? Why do you I get the sense sometimes, and I watch your videos, and I love your videos, by the way.
Thank you.
I enjoy the commentary, and it's really well done. I watched you for quite a long time, at least a year, maybe longer. But why do you think, I get the sense that sometimes you're always looking at it from the perspective of is this person reasonable? Are they using good reasoning? Are they using good logic? And that's where it stops. When I watched that, I was like, of course that has nothing to do, what he mentioned there, of course that has nothing to do with the Ukraine-Russia conflict, what's going on in the West in terms of the culture, the trans stuff, and all that kind of stuff. But I don't think that's really his purpose. I don't think he even believes that. I mean, he's way too knowledgeable in this stuff to actually believe what he said. In that case, he's a big fan of Carl Jung, right?
Mm-hmm.
And Carl Jung talks about things like, one of the things is he talks about dream interpretation. So I spent 6 years studying psychology, including 2 years in grad school.
Okay.
And I was never a fan of people like Freud and Jung. And I was always more empirically based, right? I enjoyed learning about, cultural psychology, evolution, biological basis of behavior, just a mix, neuropsychology, and then looking at that all through statistics, right?
Uh-huh.
And I was never a big fan of people like Freud and Jung and all that. These people that Peterson seems to love, but I got an appreciation for them later on. So I always sort of laughed at like the sort of giggled at at all the dream interpretation stuff. I don't know if you've ever heard about that. Like it
I've
was
seen,
something-
I've
yeah,
heard the clip of him
yeah,
talking about his grandmother by the river.
yeah. So I laughed at that stuff, right? I'm like,
Yeah.
what does this have anything to do with, treating patients and all that? It sounds very unscientific and whatever. But after reading it, I really started to see that there was actually a lot of insight into it, and that I had the wrong impression about like what the goal of that technique was. So, for example, the purpose of dream interpretation, for example, is not to glean like a potential cause of like the mental illness that the person is going through. It's not to try to get like an accurate interpretation of the dream to see what to see like what the cause of the mental illness is. It's more to see what the patient takes out of the dream, what they latch onto, because he thought that basically people basically get stuck in life and they can move on, right? They can't adapt to a situation. So what he would do is he would see what the patient latches onto, what excites them, what gives them fulfillment or satisfaction, and let them go in that direction, and that would help them get unstuck and move on with their life.
Okay.
So that's what it was. So it wasn't about like doing an accurate interpretation to sort of figure out, oh, where is this coming from? There's this deep-seated thing this is coming from, and if we figure it out accurately, the patient will be able to move on with their life and we'll figure it out. So in the same way, what I think Peterson often does is he's not trying to give you necessarily like an accurate interpretation of, oh, this is why the Ukraine-Russia war is going on. He just knows that other people are making these kinds of connections in their head, and he's doing that to essentially just influence them to say, oh, I also thought about that. Like, I think Russians do hate the fact all this stuff that's going on in the West with gays being able to get married and trans people and whatever, the feminization of Western society, all that kind of stuff. So he's just making these connections to kind of excite people to get unstuck and start actually acting and fighting sort of for the West to change and maybe become more in line with, like, let's say, more traditional values, right? So I don't think he's trying to make like a reasoning kind of argument here, right? So that's the only thing really that that I would say about that. Don't always look at him like that he's trying to make this like logical reasoning argument. I think a lot of the times he's just trying to influence people.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So I have some friends who are bigger Peterson fans than I am, which isn't hard because I'm not a Peterson fan, but
Yeah.
they've paid attention to his career for as long as he's been a public figure. They seem to think that he's partially subject to audience capture. His audience cares about the culture war. They like what he has to say about the culture war. So he's appealing to them. And B, he, obviously we view the world through certain lenses, and Jordan Peterson has his, and the culture war is one of them. And it's one that he's probably best known for at this point. And therefore, he has a hammer, and the Russia-Ukraine war looks like a nail. Because this big event is happening, he has to somehow bring a culture war explanation into it.
Exactly. Well, yeah, that's similar to basically what I'm saying. I think he's trying to. I think you also had a video with Charlie Kirk where Kirk was making connections between economics and the trans thing. So, something about that. It's a similar thing. I mean, I don't know. I'm not a fan of Charlie Kirk necessarily. Like, I don't know. He just seems loud and not necessarily all that intelligent. But having said that, though, I I don't know if he's doing the same thing as Peterson potentially, but he knows that his audience, at least part of his audience, are making those connections in their head, even though they're not reasonable connections, right? They're making those connections. And if they're making those connections, well, then let their imagination go.
Okay.
Move them towards that direction and make them think that there is a connection there. And those people who maybe have been sitting on the sidelines might wake up and actually start saying, hey, yeah, that's kind of what I was thinking in my head. And I'm actually going to now start acting. I'm going to vote, or, I'm going to start taking action and, bring America back to how it was, or whatever. But it's really to get the imagination going and get people kind of unstuck, people who are kind of bored of like the status quo kind of thing. And yeah, I mean, that's basically how I see that.
So those were actually going to be one video. And then I was like, I write out my videos beforehand in case you couldn't tell. I was like 4 pages into the Charlie Kirk one. I was like, how am I going to bring this to Jordan Peterson within a reasonable time? I was like, this video is going to be an hour long if I do it. So I just split it into, I'm like, oh, there's my 2 videos for the week.
Right.
So that worked out nicely from that angle.
Can I ask you one question?
Yeah, what's up?
So you were talking about in that video, you basically said, one of the reasons I guess you're not interested necessarily in the culture stuff is that so many of these issues don't seem that they're really pertinent to people's daily lives, like the average person, right?
No, I wouldn't say that. That's
I thought you said so, but you said something similar to that in one of the videos.
So I think you might. I talked about why I talk about certain things, and not because I necessarily deem them important in the grand scheme of things. It's because I enjoy talking about them.
Okay.
I also said that there's nothing, you don't have to talk about things that are seemingly important that have a big impact on people's lives. I think some people do like reverse engineering. They talk about what they want to talk about, and then they try and justify it as if it's super important and has these broad implications on people's lives. And I think that's part of what Charlie Kirk was doing, in that he likes railing on the trans issue. His audience likes listening to him. But there's this big inflation thing that is actually affecting way more people. And so he's got to reverse engineer the trans issue to make it about relevant to this issue that is important, but most people don't actually know what caused it or how to fix it, and there's not a whole lot they can do about it. So he just got to bring it back to the subject that he enjoys talking about and might actually know anything about.
Right.
And I think that's what Jordan Peterson was largely doing with the Ukraine-Russia thing. Like,
right. I don't disagree with you. I don't think the trans thing is necessarily dope, but you can always broaden that. Now, Charlie Kirk broadened it to a level that's pretty crazy, right? Making the connection to the economics and all that. But there is something to be said, though. It's not like it's just the trans thing, right? Like culturally speaking, in the U.S., there are other factors. I mean, there's a sizable portion of the country that is religious, that are traditional, and they certainly aren't being heard. Like, what is it? Probably 40% of the population, 50% of the population, arguably, they're rather religious or traditional. I think those kinds of issues are pretty important to them. Like, whether it's the trans issue, whether it's the gay issue, whether, all of these things. I think the fact that, I guess in the U.S. it's not necessarily true that less people are going to church than in the past. But yeah, those kinds of things, like, that affects a pretty sizable portion of the U.S. So I'm not sure like why they wouldn't be concerned. All those things are tied in together, right?
I mean, it's fine to be concerned about those things in their own right. And if that's your interest or what you deem important, okay. I think where he takes the leap that's ridiculous is tying that to something that it doesn't really belong with.
I agree. Like the economics thing is it just sounded funny. So I like the video for that because yeah, that was such a stretch. But all I'm saying is like he brought up the trans thing. I do think it goes to a broader level. Even like what do you think about like the issue of like violence and the gun violence and all that stuff? That could be brought back again to sort of a religious or level where uh, that can be explained by a lot of the things that conservatives or right wing people push in the U.S. The fact that there's a lot of single moms or single dads in some case, the breakup of the family, uh, and all that. I mean, that's all sort of tied together. So, um, I mean, I think those are fairly important issues for like a sizable number of people in the U.S. So again,
So, um, is it cool if I bring in my friend Patty? She wants to join the conversation.
sure,
I would love her, or I want her to join the conversation.
sure,
You before I do, I just on the point of guns, I actually do think that's an important
hmm
one or an important issue where culture is in
yeah,
the equation because the thing is like obviously, we have a big gun culture here in the United States and um like I think that's one of the reasons why it's caught on in pop culture, but I also think that pop culture has made guns more popular. Like everything from
yeah,
obviously Wild West movies to zombie films, like or in zombie shows. They're seen as a sign of power, a sign of security, and I think culture has reinforced that. So in that issue, I do think to a certain extent politics is downstream from culture. Hi, Patty.
Hi,
Hey, what's up?
can you guys hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay. Hi, nothing much. Just, doing weird plant nerd farmer stuff.
Okay. Have
Uh,
you've been listening to our conversation?
I've been listening, I'd say for about the past maybe 15 to 20, maybe almost 30 minutes. I think the stream's only been up for like 30 minutes. I've got in pretty soon.
Gotcha. What are
Yeah.
your thoughts on Jordan Peterson? You like the guy?
I mean, I like Jordan Peterson. I think I think I do believe that he is like heavily influenced by his audience. So his audience are going to be like young right-wing males for the most part. I don't really see much leftists following him. They're mostly a male demographic. I think that he is subject to trying to appease them. I don't think most people want to say things that angers their audience. I mean, most people, I'm not one of them. I piss off my audience all the time, but like I but
mm,
like, I think he is from what I've seen, he seems like a really nice person who doesn't like angering people. I think he doesn't like the idea that he's causing people distress or suffering, and so I think that he probably wants to appeal to people a little bit more rather than anger them.
Hmm.
um I do think that he's kind of under that influence, but the other stuff, I I think that he makes. I think one of his biggest mistakes, because I see a lot of like um, people who are psychologists or like deep philosophical thinkers, which I think that he is one of those. I think a mistake that they often make is they expose the contents of their brain to the whole world, but those contents of their brain has zero context to it. So
mm,
it's like him saying something like, um, I fucking love dogs. Like he might say something like, I fucking love dogs, right? Which I also fucking love dogs. But in his brain, he'll also be like, I fucking love dogs because dogs will jump off a fucking cliff and commit suicide for you. And then everyone's like, yeah, well, not my dog. What's that supposed to mean? He pours out the contents of his brain, but he doesn't add context to what's going on in his brain. He's not actually, everyone doesn't understand what's being said.
So he doesn't have a filter, is what you're saying.
He to some degree he lacks that filter, but that filter is less so, not he's not necessarily saying inappropriate things, but rather he's making the connections, but the connections aren't obvious to others. And I don't think that this connection is necessarily legitimate. I think that he's trying to make a good point, but it's not readily available for us to necessarily fully understand.
No, I totally agree with that. Yeah, it's like he assumes that everybody has read Carl Jung, like
I haven't read. Look,
yeah, like I mean, for sure, I agree with all that 100% for sure.
Yeah.
I mean, I have criticisms of him too. Like, I don't like when he exaggerates with things. He was like one time on Joe Rogan, and he literally said something like, Joe, I haven't slept for 2 weeks, something like that.
Yeah.
And it's like, come on, you didn't sleep for 2 weeks. Like,
that's bullshit. Like, obviously.
Like,
yeah.
Like, do you like, so that kind of stuff, I don't like it, and I mean, I wouldn't call myself a fanboy. I mean, he's a human, like, I don't know, like, for me, the conservative position has always been that it's kind of like a thing that Thomas Sowell says, humans are limited both intellectually and morally. And so that includes Jordan Peterson.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
So that's what I would leave it at.
I don't think Peterson is right on this issue. I think the connection with Russia, like it, so like I don't know as to degree. I know Steve's been on Discord like one time to do an AMA. I don't know if you've been on Discord, but like I talk to people on Discord like all the time, and I get to experience people who either they're trolling or they're being sincere in that they support Russia and they believe everything Russia says. And I think that there's a great deal of people who are right-wing. I myself am right-wing. I consider myself like a conservative libertarian. I experience too many of them who kind of just feed into the kind of the hate the West kind of feeding into hate the West.
Mm-hmm.
So the West are the cause of the problems. The West do this, the West do that. The West has a bunch of degeneracy. Like they feed into that because I think many of them want to have a world where everyone's a good Christian and everyone does this and that and they have a family, or at least a nuclear family for that matter. It's just, that's not how the world works. They want it to work that way. And they see that the West is full of like free ideals and free activities. And they're like, man, that's a problem because they're not doing what I want them to do.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not sure as to the degree that Peterson believes that, because as far as I understood, I thought that Peterson was kind of a leftist, like not leftist, that's wrong, kind of a moderate. And so to the degree of him kind of feeding into that anti-West, the West is degenerate and Russia hates that, and that means Russia's just reacting to Western degeneracy, is a weird take for me.
Yeah. Well, I would agree with you that I don't think he's really right-wing or conservative. I mean, I think he is moderate or maybe even slightly on the left, because he is way too much of, he values ideas way too much to be on the right wing. Okay, because I mean, a lot of the right wing sort of looks down on intellectuals and just this whole idea of expertise and all this stuff. Like if you look at the populist right, there's a lot of people that are very anti-intellectual, experts telling them what to do. And it's just generally, from what I see from conservatives, it's not like the intellect is not necessarily something that a lot of us value. I think in part it's because we do see that it is very limited. So why exactly would we honor this thing or value it all that much? So I think that's perfect. So I like, he comes too much at this from like an intellectual academic point of view. So and that is generally where leftists are also coming at it from. A lot of theory, little actual practical experience in the real world. Jonathan Haidt, on the other hand, who's another psychologist, I think he's got a much more kind of practical understanding of what the differences are between, for example, conservatives and liberals or people on the left. Like one thing he found, well, I won't get into this because it's actually quite long, but he had a book on this, for example, where he found that both conservatives and liberals actually believe in equity, but it's slightly different. It's like people on the left believe in equity in terms of, let's say salary or income should be similar. There shouldn't be that much of a gap or any gap. While for a conservative, equity is more about if you put in the work, what's equitable is to get that back, to get an output based on that. So the harder that you work, for example, the more that you get back. So you should basically get back what you put in. So it's that kind of equity, slightly different. So yeah, I mean, to me, he seems definitely a moderate, maybe even slightly on the left, because he comes at it from that perspective.
Doesn't he describe himself as like a disaffected liberal? He kind of does that shtick.
Yeah.
Like when he says this, I assume he means like I'm a dissatisfied Democrat or something like that. If you were in the United States.
Yeah. He I said kind of tongue in cheek in my video, like the type of conservative who wants a rustic cabin and a big titted trad wife with like 7 kids. And I'm sure you guys have seen the Reddit posts of that, like, and so yeah, there's this real thing but there is a very real idea that the West is degenerate and that we've traded, everything from, obviously we've we sent our values down the river by embracing gay marriage and all that stuff, but also it's slightly anti-capitalist too. It's like we've let these foreign corporations come and sell us these cheap cars, and we've traded them. We've given up the good jobs that are the backbone of the rustic cabin with the big titty trad wife.
Yeah.
You can't live that life anymore because we've engaged in commerce with all these nations, and they've undermined our values, and we should have our own culture.
Yeah.
And so there's that very real idea, and obviously I don't buy into that, but Russia very much is aware of that, and they lean into that with their propaganda.
So, go on. No, you're fine.
And I think Jordan Peterson appeals to that same crowd. And so somebody in my comment section was like, Jordan Peterson's a Russian asset. I'm like, he's certainly not being paid by the Russians. Like,
right.
I just think that they both they're speaking to a similar audience. Obviously, Russia has lots of different forms of propaganda that they broadcast all over the place, but in that way, they're very much speaking to the same audience. So Jordan Peterson is going to hit on some of their same anxieties.
So what I find, that was actually really interesting what you just brought up, because literally right now I just came from listening to an AMA on Discord of this guy named Haz. I'm not sure. It's Haz.
Infrared.
Oh, yeah, and he's the exact same way, except I guess he squarely defines himself as a communist, but like he has that exact same view where he's like, we're selling these cheap cars. We have like, the West is degenerate. They are doing, I don't know if this is it. Like, I think I would be strawmanning him just a tad bit, but they're doing the interracial marriage and the homosexuality, and he has like very obvious, like not very progressive views. He defines himself economically as a communist, but he's also got this like, really strange right-wing authoritative view about the way culture should look like, and the way families and couples should look like, and the way people should live. He wants to return to monkey to some sense, like like it was very strange listening to it, because I do feel like that's becoming more prevalent around, forget Hasanabi, right? Because this is just becoming more prevalent around a lot of people who espouse communism. And I'm just going to say this may be like, I don't know, this may be throwing the baseball too far, but like, it reminds me a lot of 1950s to like 1970s KKK, neo-Nazi, and white supremacist like nonsense. It's the same views that they have. this is going to sound really horrible, but it's hilarious. Like, I don't understand why I have cable because I can just do this. I love to read Stormfront. It is the funniest thing I've ever read. And the same thing is on Stormfront about how capitalism bad and oh, sorry, one second.
But that's Patty is black for those of you who don't know, so her
Yes,
reading
I am
Stormfront is
black.
particularly interesting. But yeah, so here's where people say horseshoe theory of politics, because like the left and the right are a lot like each other in this respect. You know, I don't. That's a whole topic in and of itself. But one of Haas's fellow travelers, Jackson Hinkle, describes himself as an American patriot, but of course he just constantly shills for Russia. So I have not heard him explain his American patriotism. I don't know, like, I think he's talked about it before, but if I had to guess, it would be something along the lines of like, we need a traditional America along certain values, and those values, the natural extrapolation of those values will lead us to communism, because he's a communist too. But he's also constantly shilling for Russia, like not just the apologetics of like, oh well, Russia only invaded because NATO expanded, like actively like rah, let's go Russia, crush Ukraine, and that sort of thing.
Yeah, I thought he was also like progressive on the social aspect too.
Hinkle, he might be. He
Yeah.
might pay lip service to it, but every time I listen to him talk and look at his channel, it's him talking about how great Vladimir Putin is.
You guys find I am almost incapable, and I don't know why or what's wrong with me or YouTube. You guys are really good at finding the most cringe progressives and communists that ever walked the earth. You guys are really good at it.
I mean, they're if you look for them, they're not hard to find.
That's true. I think my problem is that I have a hard time just sitting there listening to it. I think that's my problem.
So people are like always tell me, oh, you're obsessed with Kyle Kalinske, which, okay, yeah, kind of. But I actually talk about the Young Turks more, but there's a reason why I talk about those guys so much. It's because they're in a sweet spot. They constantly have dumb takes, and they're very cringe in many ways, and they get a rise out of me, but it's not they don't piss me off so much that I actually can't watch. Like, one of the reasons why I don't talk about Jimmy Dore as much as I probably would like to is because, like, I make a 2-minute student video and I'm already going nuts. Like, I'm pacing around my apartment. Like, fucking idiot. What is he talking? Like, I probably look like a lunatic if somebody's watching me. But and so yeah, I get that with Jimmy Dore, and I get that with Jackson Hinkle, and so I can only, you can't be so cringe that I just can't watch you.
Yeah, that's me with Hasanabi. I can't,
okay.
like, I'm pacing around if I listen to him.
He was on a stream. Somebody sent me the link that he was going off on this. The Soviet Union ended the Holocaust. And,
no.
Yeah, which is such an idiotic talk. Like, one of the main reasons why the Soviets happened to liberate the concentration camps is just because so much of the European Jewish population was east of Germany. It's not because they were so kind and they literally like drove Ukraine into a famine where people were cannibalizing each other. They were not opposed to mass slaughter. The Russians weren't. But now all these people who weirdly just want workplace democracy have all these apologetics for a centrally planned Soviet economy. It's weird. It's the weirdest thing.
Very weird. I agree. Yeah, no, sorry. Sorry, my daughter walked in wanting to ask me something, but yeah, what I was saying about like the KKK thing is that when I read when I read those forums, I see a lot of the anti-capitalist stuff. The West is degenerate. They're doing capitalist nonsense. Capitalist nonsense is breeding economic success, which it is. That economic success transcends into liberties. So people get to do whatever they want because the money, this a certain demographic of people that I don't like labeled here. And further from that, it goes into how this is breeding a degeneracy It's breeding a sexual degeneracy, a religious degeneracy that breeds atheism or a lack of foundation in God, period, a hostility against religion. And I hear this a lot from authoritarian leftists. You know, I'm not surprised when I hear it from very hard right-wingers, because that's just par for the course, but I'm always surprised to hear it from really hard communists and hard socialists. And they're mostly tankies as far as I'm concerned.
Right. You know, it's interesting you say that, because Jonah Goldberg always talks about, capitalism pretty unceremoniously discards things, and that can have a major impact on the culture. Like, he talks about how the car really changed the culture more than any idea that ever escaped a German university. Like, obviously it gave people freedom to move around, but also it made things like adultery easier, because you could just go out in a car and, you know, take your partner,
Your
you know how people
call,
do
your
things,
booty
and
call.
in cars like that. It's
Yeah.
like, so there's definitely something to it, but the alternative is putting these assholes in charge of what new technologies we can have, how to coordinate the economy and whatnot. It's like,
I don't even think they want technology at this point. I think that they kind of believe that who's the guy who bombed that building? Or bombed a couple people.
the Unabomber?
Yeah, I think he made some sort of like manifesto where he
Ted
defined
Kaczynski?
Kaczynski. Yeah, so I think that they do a lot of admiration of Kaczynski, which is just really gross. They feel that technology is taking them away from natural things. So they do a lot of appeals to naturalism, and they have this idea that, again, like return to monkey, the closer we are to monkey, the better off life is. Good luck with that, like without your vaccines and shit, but like,
Right.
you know.
Got anything to say about that? No more politics?
Oh, wow. Well, well, plenty, but we only have limited time, right? Well, I mean, going back to what you said about, I mean, it's definitely true what you said about what capitalism has done with, creating so much innovation, essentially, and all that kind of stuff is really accelerating society in a crazy way. And definitely, I mean, traditional people, more conservative people, but clearly, as Patty says, even some people on the left are not comfortable with how fast things are progressing, how much we're relying on technology, for sure. But also, I don't think ideas have ever really impacted people's behavior. Like, psychologically speaking, ideas rarely actually impact people's behavior. It's usually like, first off, I would say that feelings are often like, Jung also talks about this, and I think Peterson brings it up as well, is that both reasoning and feelings are totally rational. And so, for example, feelings actually measure risk. I don't know if you've ever heard about that, but essentially, I think a lot of these people are feeling like they're losing their traditions. This is causing a lot of fear. They feel this fear, and they feel like they have to do something about it. Obviously, Ted Kaczynski went way too far, but unfortunately, I think a lot of people are feeling this way. And I have the same concerns as Patty does about this, because it seems only the things are only accelerating. So that's actually a big concern as well for me, how this will sort of play out.
Interesting. So I got a super chat from Armani Villafane, $20. Thank you very much. He asks, do you think people like Peterson are driven to espouse Russian propaganda because they need to own the libs any way possible? Seem to forget we are Team USA. Would love to join the convo. Love the channel and not a loudmouth. Hit me up on Twitter and I can probably get you a link. That's that's the only way I can think of. But as far as your question goes, it is very bizarre to me that Russia has these bot farms that spread propaganda. And then it's not weird because all governments spread propaganda, but it's weird to me because they have so many people who do it for free. Why are they bothering to pay for it? And some of them I do think do it to own the libs. Is that the case with Peterson? No, I think he, like I said in my video, I think he's deliberately or maybe it's like some deep-seated psychological reasons, or maybe it's on purpose, that he's deliberately elevated the importance of his ideological opponents, in this case the woke left, to the level where they're a contributing factor of Russia's invasion. Therefore, he, as one of their primary critics, is the price of not heeding his warnings is potentially nuclear war. I think it's all about elevating the importance of his enemies. I do think a lot of people are stuck in that own the libs thing, though. I notice people are always like, "Oh, you should check out Michael Malice." And maybe he's great. I have no idea. But every time I see him, he seems to be on the own the libs wavelength, despite the fact that he's an anarchist and in theory shouldn't be on the same side as the right. But
it's lib derangement syndrome.
Yeah, I think you're right.
Yeah.
So I'm going to bring my friend Kevin into the call. Kevin, what's up?
Oh, how's everybody doing? Thanks, Steve. It's good to be on here. I don't think I've ever been on your channel before, but you've obviously been on mine on Twitch a couple times, and I interviewed you on my YouTube channel once. Of course, I like your channel. I think what you do is very based, and I think you're fighting an upstream battle right now against hordes of cringe mongers and losers, and you love to see
it. Have you watched my most recent video?
Which one was that? I've been very busy with work this week, but I've been trying to keep up with your content. So
I talked about Jordan Peterson's dumb take on Russia. And
no, I didn't see that. I saw the one on Charlie Kirk. That was the most recent one I saw.
They were actually originally going to be the same video, but then I was like, as I said earlier in the stream, I was way into the script. I was like, this is going to be like an hour-long video, which I'm not making. It's going to be 2 videos.
Yeah,
but
yeah, it's bad. Yeah, the one that Reese and I did reacting to Jordan Peterson was 8 hours that we did.
Well, that's because oh my god, the video itself is like a half hour of the original video, and 59
minutes, I think it was.
Oh, Jesus,
yeah.
I have to say, I was saying earlier in the stream that I really don't care that much about Jordan Peterson. Really didn't pay much attention to him prior to this. I saw the thing where he was with Sam Harris, and he's like, if something's useful, then it's the truth or whatever. I'm loosely paraphrasing here. And after that, I didn't pay him much mind. But then like this Russia thing came out, and I obviously responded to it. But after watching the video, I'm like, God, this guy's presentation is so pretentious.
It's very bad. He says what you could say in 20 words, he says in 240 words. And that is a long run trend of his, because I've been aware of him for at least 7 years now. And he was always doing this type of stuff. And it's bad. It's really bad considering the fact that he doesn't actually have original ideas. The reason why he appears profound to his audience, and I've been saying this for years, because when I was in university, a lot of people tried to sell me on him as if he was like this great man. And I'm like, look, he said some things that I've agreed with before and a lot of stuff that I disagree with, but no matter what it is, nothing that he says is original. And the reason why it appears original and unique to his audience is because most of them are people who have never really engaged in literature before. And the irony is that they themselves lead what they would call a degenerate lifestyle. And so when he cites Freud or Jung, but doesn't actually credit their names, they've never read those guys. So it appears an original idea to them. And they think that Jordan Peterson is this champion of intellectualism, when in reality, it's just regurgitated Jungism with modern Kremlin aesthetics, basically, and Duginist talking points. It's bad, and honestly, people like Yuri Bezmenov warned that the Kremlin would take advantage of these people decades ago and use them to turn the West against itself. So they used to do that with the left. Now they do it with the left and the right. So the Kremlin's gotten smarter. So
Interesting.
I think that was, I find that to be like a major criticism that I have, like with, for example, Black conservatism. Like people like Candace Owens, I fucking hated the fact that people went out of their way to say that she was a champion of like conservative intellectualism. That is the dumbest fucking shit I've ever. Sorry, I have a potty mouth, but like that is the dumbest thing I have ever heard. A lot of what she says is regurgitated stuff from years ago, whether it came from Thomas Sowell or from any other Black conservative who has come before her. And I see that regurgitation of various comments from a lot of conservative spokesmen and commentators nowadays. They're not actually adding anything to discourse concerning issues within those ideologies, but people love them all the same, which drives me crazy.
Candace Owens is a charlatan. I can't stand her, and she's incredibly overrated. And honestly, to a great degree, been astroturfed by these well-funded organizations on the right that are just so desperate to have somebody who's a person of color supporting, the ideology of like, King and Roy Moore and those types of people. So
Candace Owens is for your typical Fox News Facebook uncle, which I literally have one. Patty has met him,
no.
Uncle Bruce.
Uncle Bruce.
He loves Candace Owens, and it's like, and I hate to give Cenk Uygur credit for her, but it's because she's one of the Black people who calls out the bad parts of Black culture. That's a big reason why he's such a fan.
Yeah, Uncle Bruce, like the expert on Black culture.
It's like, Uncle Bruce, do I really need to tell the details about our family and we're gonna call other cultures degenerates? But hey, that's neither here nor there.
Right.
We got another person, Armani. You were the one who gave the $20 super chat. What's your
yeah. What's up, Steven?
Hey, what do you know?
Real quick, I apologize, but real quick, I just wanted to respond to a comment that was made, and I think that someone thought that I was blaming men for something.
Oh.
It was in a prior comment on the chat. No, I'm not blaming men for things. While you guys start a lot of wars, we're partly the cause of that. So, no, I'm not blaming men for anything. Don't take anything I say as like blaming a certain demographic of people. It's not how that works.
Wait. If women were in power throughout history at the same volume or percentage as men, most of the wars in history would have been started by women, though. So
Helen of Troy voluntarily left with Paris and that launched 1,000 ships. So
yeah.
So Armani, what's your deal? What's going on, man? How you doing?
Not much, brother. I love your channel, by the way.
Thank you.
But when I sent the comment over to you, I think judging by a lot of stuff that's going on, I feel like a lot of the right wing falls for that kind of same propaganda. You know what I mean? Like the Tulsi Gabbard, the Tucker Carlson thing. Do you feel like that's going to be a bigger danger? Like once, the shift from whatever that we're at now, from the left side of politics to more, right-leaning side of politics, that's going to be an issue, like populism and, America first kind of thing. I
think there is a big market for, I guess, what you would call socially conservative and fiscally moderate. Like, obviously, they're not as far left as the online left in their economic views. They're not like for nationalizing whole industries, but they're definitely for some heavy-handed economic planning. And I think there's a big market for that, and that Trump kind of tapped into. Obviously, he didn't do it with grace because he doesn't do anything with grace. But I think a more clever propagandist like a Tucker Carlson could really hit those notes.
Right. Yeah. And I have a lot of friends, in this, like, I live in New Jersey. So when I find somebody,
I'm sorry.
Yeah. Good. Oh,
Go on.
well, okay, yeah.
I was making fun of New
It-
Jersey. So
No, it does suck. You should be sorry, but I live in Hoboken, so it's not all that bad, but you leave around there and
I
it
mean, with a
sucks.
name like that, how do you cope, man?
yeah, hobos are your kin. So
That's funny. But no, it was it's weird because I have few right wing friends, and when I do make one, you want to keep them, especially in New Jersey. But you see, like they're not the type of, I guess right wing, or I don't even know what to call my view. It's just whatever's better for America. They're just rooting on Russia, or whatever it takes just to own the libs.
owning the libs is it's fun to watch sometimes. I don't deny that, but
Right.
I don't know. I don't think it's a good operating political philosophy. But hey, that's just me.
Yeah, I loved your video on when you I think you said something on you saw a comment under like a Young Turks video saying, would Stalin get or I forgot something about Stalin getting unemployment down to 0%, and that
Uh-huh.
was kind of like your come to God moment, seeing like, yeah, people are embracing socialism now, and I
Yeah,
feel like, yeah,
that was in a Secular Talk video. I want to say it was from 2018, and it was like Eric Eric Trump was on Sean Hannity, and Hannity was like, Donald Trump could get employment down to 0%. You don't actually want 0% unemployment, but he
Yeah.
says that, and then in the comment section, there's some tanky idiot who's like, oh, he's gonna be like Joseph Stalin and get it to 0%. And I didn't know if he was being sarcastic, like, oh, is he gonna gulag 20 billion people and like get the unemployment down that way? No, he was serious, and like Soviet style central planning is the best way to run an economy. That's what he was getting at, which was
Well, these populoids are the same people bigging up communist China right now, talking about how beautiful their trains are and how America's bad because America's like a free market. And Tucker Carlson was somebody who he had a debate with Ben Shapiro a couple years back, and they're debating about economics. And you're like, these are two conservative guys, but one straight up sounds like a socialist. Like if you didn't know context, you would think that this was just Ben Shapiro arguing against like some loser college kid at one of his tours who's like wearing a Chase shirt or something. Yeah, it's Tucker Carlson. So
yeah, that's when he said that if he had the authority, he would ban the driverless car. Obviously, it's a nascent technology. It was a nascent technology then. It's a nascent technology now. Who knows if it'll ever become a thing? But that's the sort of economic planning I'm talking about. Like, yeah, because we calculated on the spreadsheet that the country will be worse off for that, and now we're going to, preemptively take that away. Tucker Carlson and his minions are not that smart that they can plan our economy like that, nor do I trust them to do it ethically, even if they were smart enough to make the right decisions.
Carlson himself is fascinating in that he has openly said that he's not a Republican, which I don't know as to the truth of that statement. He likely has voted for Republicans and Democrats like I have, but I don't know, like sometimes I'm pretty sure he's playing a character and maybe I'm being too charitable. Other times, like I'm pretty sure that there are some like just really authoritarian aspects or maybe even to some degree like liberal aspects that come out of him. But he's like a really strange like enigma when it comes to like conservative commentary. I cannot like pin him down because he makes many contradictory statements while in the studio and then outside the studio.
Well, that's because populism and populoids aren't actually a consistent sort of ideology. The only real consistency that they have is this vague appeal to the working class and this sort of rhetoric and whatnot. But, it's Hitler and Lenin both had that appeal. They both talked about the working class and the working people of Germany or Russia. And people see them as like opposite ideologies and everything. But at the end of the day, the one real uniting sort of backbone of populism is economic socialism. That's really it. That's what unites these people. And when Ben Shapiro and Tucker debated, you're like, no, this is a debate between socialism and capitalism. And yet this is supposed to be like, a Fox News debate. It's supposed to be the right having a conversation about what's a better path to go down, and yet it basically came down to central planning versus free markets. Like, that's insane. And the other people at Fox, like the actual like capitalists at Fox, have to be aghast that this guy that they share a workspace with is the number one news channel in America, when he straight up jacks off Viktor Orban in Hungary, shills for a man aiming 8,000 nukes at America and her allies, and has talked about how communist China is more manly than America. Like, it's an embarrassment. Like, Hannity has to be disgusted with Tucker. He had Sean Penn on to promote Ukraine, and then Tucker brings on Tanky Tulsi to talk shit about Ukraine.
So I have to ask you guys, and this is a word that has been like the bane of conservative existence for maybe.
Hold on, it's not a word that's gonna get my channel deleted, is it?
No, it's not the N word. If that's what you're wondering.
No. Let's hear it.
Fascist.
Okay.
Do you guys think that people like Tucker Carlson, a better word for him would just be fascist?
That's such a vague term.
See?
I don't think it's far off, because there was a lot of economic planning in fascism, and there was definitely this appeal to sort of a national character. Like, only some people are the real people. That was, and I think Tucker Carlson definitely hits that note. Would I necessarily call it fascist? I don't know. Again, it's such a vague term that I would have to, actually, and it's such a loaded term too, that I would probably not call it that, just out of a sense of caution.
Yeah. It's kind of like, I find myself, I think I've been a little bit more regular with the term lately because I'm just exposed to it a bit more. But like, it's kind of like the word racist, right? I don't want to call everyone racist. If I call everyone racist, well then, like, who's the actual racist?
Right.
It's the same thing with fascism. It's a very loaded term. You have to be like really careful with it, or else you're just doing the whole thing a disservice.
Yeah, I agree. I don't know if you remember, Kevin, but one time Sean Hannity actually did bust Tucker Carlson's chops on his anti-capitalism stuff. There was Tucker Carlson on a show was like, and Jeff Bezos and Amazon are evil, and then Sean Hannity, because they did the switch over and they kind of bullshit for a minute, and Hannity's like, somebody works hard, they deserve to keep the spoils of their labor, and blah blah blah. And like Tucker's like, well, I agree. What are you mad about? Playing stupid all of a sudden, even though like very clearly he was
caught in 4K.
Yeah, very clearly he was railing against Jeff Bezos for being rich.
Tucker, the irony, the absolute irony.
Well, there have been statements by him that like he was talking about Bill O'Reilly, and he's like, O'Reilly, he's this elite because he's Harvard educated and he's wealthy. He's not a everyman. Nobody like him could ever be an everyman, and he's just pandering to these people because they're his audience, and he's good at it. And what is Tucker Carlson? He's a trust fund baby, the heir to the Swanson fortune. He was handed everything in his life, and all of a sudden he was on TV for forever until Jon Stewart owned him so bad, and he took off the bow tie, and now he's got this job. So it's like, either he had this sincere ideological conversion and he cares about people who are nothing like him and have completely different backgrounds, or it's all an act and all work because he really despises these people and he's just pandering to them because he sees them as useful. I think it's the latter.
Yeah, and I don't find Tucker to be all that sincere. I certainly don't believe that because I don't believe that people just like create ideological ideas or change their ideological ideas overnight, especially in context of getting owned in a debate. I really don't. As much as I argue with people in Discord, it's just for, at that point, entertainment, because like, who actually changes their mind after a debate? Not many people.
No.
Would you think that other people watching the debate changed their mind, though?
Yeah, that's the point. So that's really, when you get down to it, that's the point of of debating a lot of the times is that you're really not trying to change the mind of your interlocutor. You're trying to change the mind of the people in the audience, or at least make people in the audience feel that if they agree with your interlocutor, there are some serious flaws. People in the midst of a conversation rarely ever change their minds. They feel very confident about the way that they debate. They feel very good about the way that they debate. But other people often, if you look at like YouTube commentators, Hassan has been owned so many fucking times in debates, but this, I was about to say the N word, but the regular version of it.
Okay.
This I am a very edgy person on the internet. I have to stop. So like, he has been owned so many times on the internet, but he is very convinced that he's a great debater. He's very convinced that he's right, no matter how many times someone proves him to be wrong. It's his commentators that usually tell him when he's wrong. The same thing goes for Destiny. I remember when I got into a debate with Destiny and he called me an Uncle Tom. Yeah, and his followers said, dude, you were wrong. But Destiny was still very adamant that despite the fact that he talked to me, that nothing he did was wrong. It's his followers who were pretty sure that he was wrong. They never change their minds. They usually cave to peer pressure in some way, but they don't really change their minds.
Well, like I'm a debate bro. I've got close to 50 debates on my playlist on YouTube. I've got a lot more on Twitch. I can tell you this. Has anybody I've ever debated changed their mind? I think on 2 or 3 occasions, somebody's actually told me straight up that, yeah, you know, I used to think this way, and then you changed my mind around intervention, that sort of stuff. Here's what the rest of the debates boil down to, though. It's about exposing the other view so that the audience, not just my audience, but their audience and people in the middle can actually see a debate unfold, get exposed to different ideas, and then the more persuasive side will come around. And of course, one of the big criticisms that people will levy against debate bro culture is that it tends to favor the person with better rhetoric and the person who's more charismatic. But what I say to that is, okay, well, if you're sad that you lost a debate because you sounded like, you know, an antisocial 15-year-old who's never been outside their mom's basement, well, that's not my fault. Maybe you should stay off the internet then and let the big boys handle it. And so I am a big defender of debate culture, and I can say straight up that there is a great social value in exposing somebody for their stupid views. And for me personally, I care as much about whether the person I'm debating changes their mind as I do about some random Facebook commenter if they change their mind. I care about changing people on the whole and en masse, but one person doesn't really matter that much. Like if that one person doesn't change their mind, but exposing them in that debate changed 30 people's view of something, then that's a net win for me, right? Like that's still a W. So,
do you feel like, I mean, in my personal opinion, Steven Crowder does that. He does the stick, you know, the change my mind debates. But do you feel like it's kind of disingenuous to label, you know, if you're going to enter into a debate and this guy, you know, he built his whole career about, like, let's just say, you know, a pro-gun Second Amendment thing. Don't you feel it's like kind of disingenuous that he's saying like, hey, I'm open to changing my mind when, like, if your whole life and principles are based on that, isn't that kind of a disingenuous thing to say?
No. Like, here's the thing. I don't like Crowder, but here's the thing about Crowder. If you spend your whole career defending a position, but then you go out there and defend that position, well, you're going to be one of the strongest arguers for that position. You now, might he be disingenuous? Might he just be saying that to get attention? Sure, but is it also totally possible that you could care a lot about something and also say, hey, look, if somebody out there can change my mind on this, I'd love to hear it. I think that you could definitely do that. Here's the problem with Crowder. Problem with Crowder isn't that he debates or has this front of debating. The problem with Crowder is that he's terrified to actually debate. So I call him Coward Crowder because he dodged a debate with Sam Cedar for 3 years. Sam Cedar is a goofball. Sam Cedar is a brainlet. Imagine being terrified to debate Sam Cedar. Steven Crowder's own father told Steven Crowder, hey, look, you can't debate this guy. He's going to destroy you. And he got scared and he ran off when he was confronted with Sam Cedar. And I'm looking at this and I'm like, But Sam Cedars a brainlet. Why are you scared of this guy? Because here's the thing: even if Steven Crowder actually lost the debate, his audience would still think he won. He'd still be getting donations, and he'd still go about his day, and nobody would be talking about him right now. But, you know, in that sense, but instead he gets clowned on because he's scared to debate Sam Cedar. And most of the people that are clowning on him are like Sam Cedar fans. I don't like Sam Cedar. I think Sam Cedar is a joke. That's why I find it especially embarrassing to see Crowder's behavior when confronted with him. So it made Sam Cedar look like this powerful legend. So
Crowder is kind of the dark side of debate bro culture, in that he's totally performative about it. I don't think he actually cares about changing his mind. It's about owning the libs.
Exactly. I agree with that.
So Digging Deeper gave a 1999 super chat. Thank you, Digging Deeper. He asks, thoughts on Marx's idea his revolution would happen in a developed country like Germany or France, but always fails, i.e. Paris Commune, but only seems to succeed in underdeveloped countries like Russia or China. I'm pro-capitalist. I was reading a book on the Cold War, actually, and the author talked about this briefly. Part of the reason is that one of the, when developed states, as miserable as it was working in some of those factories, or developing states, I should say, the people were a lot better off than like the peasant class in China or Russia. And so like people had genuine grievances with how things were run, and their grievances were greater in Russia or China. So that made them a little more receptive to Marx's ideas in Russia and China.
And the only counter to that, right, in Europe, against Marxism, I mean, the common in Europe, there is no American, conservative party like that over there, right? It's like nationalist versus like a labor party, right? It's very different from us.
Also, France and Germany had stronger states than Russia and China at the time. Russia and China's revolutions came out of civil wars. So that's probably a big reason why it happened. I know Germany was able to squash its little communist revolution.
Yeah, and
Go on. Sorry.
No, you're fine. You were in the middle of something.
Which, who knows? I mean, what they got was the Third Reich, so it's not like that really ended well, but communism was no treat either.
I think you should be careful with the word secede, right? So just making sure I'm rereading this question to make sure I'm answering it. But underdeveloped countries are almost always receptive to new ideas. They're looking for any way out. Like, it's just like what Steve said. These countries have a peasant class that are a lot more unhappy with the ruling class, or what people describe as the elite. And I know that sounds very similar to like the United States, because we have an elite, but we're not anywhere near like people being upset about their standard of living because the elite exists. That's totally opposite from undeveloped countries. And it's not only that, like, for example, with China, you got to remember, so I love talking about China in that I love talking about their history, because I got to live in China my second year of college. It was really fun, also really depressing at the same time. And so when it comes to China at that time was dealing with like serious issues regarding nationhood. It was certainly like China, but it's China built up of a bunch of provinces that have some level of their own autonomy. At the time that they were initially being ruled by the Kuomintang, which is their nationalist party, that nationalist party, when the revolution ended, moved out into Taiwan. And so these places are... these places were brewing with conflict. They had just come out of a series of wars in which their countries were completely pillaged and raped. So, I mean, these are just completely downtrodden countries. They don't have any place else to go. This is like the last leg of the run to get into industrialization. That industrialization killed millions of people, but it was the only, I would really describe it as like the only thing left. Other countries didn't really care about them.
Well, if you had to in China choose between Mao or the KMT, you're better off under the KMT, and we can see how that bore out with Taiwan. I mean, people say, oh yeah, Taiwan's only a democracy in the last 20 years. It's like, okay, sure, so was South Korea. But let's look at them when they were a dictatorship in the 70s. Both PRC and the ROC were dictatorships in the 70s. Guess who had 6 times higher GDP per capita than the other? You're still better off in a capitalist dictatorship than a communist one. So
Totally.
Yeah, definitely.
So hopefully that answered your question, digging deeper. But that would be a good video topic. Maybe I'll make one on that.
Well, Chile's another good example of that. Like, nobody's a fan of Pinochet or anything. He killed a lot of people. So did Castro. At least people had food in Chile. Like, that's the difference. It's like, if you got to live under a dictator, you're better off with a pro-Western U.S. dictator than starvation dictatorship. So.
You might, if you say the wrong thing, take a long ride on a helicopter into the ocean, but you're right, there would be food.
Well, and that same thing would happen to you in the alternative. It's just true, there wouldn't be food. So that's the difference. Like, people act like, oh, it's a choice between, like democracy and a dictatorship or whatever. And it's like, no, it's a choice between being a Soviet client state or an American client state. American client states tend to have food. Soviet ones didn't. So communism sucks is basically the point. So, but
none of those were real communism, Kevin. Come on.
Well, Marx, of course, thought that it would follow from these capitalist systems because his teleology mandated that it occur in Western Europe because they were the only ones that had reached the capitalist stage. Marx would have said, you can't jump from agrarianism to capitalism. You have to industrialize first. This is why communist China, funny enough, the smartest communists you'll ever meet are dangists who wear suits and ties. They're not like the guys in the gym being like, yeah, look at how tough we are. We're communists or whatever. Like, those guys are clowns. The actual smart communists have glasses, 50 years old, wear suits, have their Communist Party memberships in like Shenzhen and Shanghai and Guangzhou and stuff. And those guys know what Marx said, which was, you can't go from China in the 20s to communism overnight. You have to industrialize first. So this is why the Communist Party in China pursued an aggressive policy of getting the West to build factories and everything there, because they knew that our elites were too corrupt and too principleless to actually not invest in the communist project over there. And this is why the neoliberal establishment in America has gotten so addicted to China, because they cared more about money than principles. And so they did free trade with the slave state. And the Communist Party over there, they were smart because they said, look, we understand that to get to full communism, we have to have the industry first, because like they actually believe in what Marx was teaching. And so they're like, but we can't afford any of that crap because we're a dirt poor backwater. So how about we open up to American markets and let them pay for it because they're greedy, and they'll just see cheap labor without realizing the strategic consequences. And then bingo, that happened. Now in full disclosure, of course, I think that Nixon was right to reach out to China, because he changed the Cold War from a 2v1 to a 1v2 against the Soviets. That was good. My contention isn't with Nixon. It's that America kept doing business after the Soviets fell apart. After the Soviets collapsed, we should completely blockaded and bankrupted China and gotten them a capitalist democracy. Instead, continued the relationship as if Moscow was still the number one enemy in 1991, which it wasn't. The new enemy was China. And nobody recognized that until fairly recently, and that's unfortunate. So, we got Kirk.
We have. Okay, so I had been planning this 6 o'clock stream for a long time with no more politics. And then all of a sudden, Kirk has to release a fucking video at that time. And then he goes streaming on Twitch afterwards. Well, here you are, Kirk.
Well, excuse me, princess.
Yeah, I'm actually streaming on Twitch right now.
Are we okay? So we can't say the C word or the S.
Yeah,
word,
no
right?
gamer words. There's no gamer words here.
You mean I can't say the N word?
Well, you can't say that anyway.
You definitely can't say that.
I'm just joking. Look, it's the hood in me. I'm trying to contain it. I'm trying to make the stream like not so black. Okay.
You cannot say the word that starts with S, rhymes with limp, or the word that starts with C and rhymes with duck. So.
Oh, really? I didn't. That's against Twitch.
Yeah, no, that's against Twitch TOS. Can't say that. Can't say the R word. Bunch of different stuff. Well, technically, you can't say the R word on Twitch. You can't say it on my channel on Twitch.
I mean, I wasn't gonna say those words anyway. I'm not that edgy. I'm just mostly joking.
I am I'm partial to the R word. I know, like
Same.
it's the one word that I use that can get me kicked off of platforms. Like I can hold back on the F word and the S word and all that stuff. But like if somebody says something just so goddamn stupid, I gotta call them the R word.
No. You got to do what what we've done over on my channel, because we have to get creative due to TOS limitations. So we say things like, your views are very disappointing, or we'll say things like that's goober pilled. Goober pilled is another one. Like, look, there are ways that you can do it without getting your channel or your accounts at risk. And I would say a word to the wise out there. If you're thinking about streaming on Twitch, I guarantee it within 2 years, the R word will be banned on Twitch. I mean, they banned the C word. They banned so much stuff. The only reason why it hasn't gone banned there yet is because it's primarily a gaming platform, and it's one of the more notorious gaming words. But I'm telling you, it will be gone, and the sooner you remove it from your vocabulary, the better the operational security of your social media career will be. So that's the word to the wise.
It's the one time I got suspended from Twitter was when I called somebody the R word.
Same.
That'll do it. Yeah.
Here, I'm not trying to disparage people with autism or Down syndrome or anything like that. I will stop saying that, but I need an adequate replacement that cuts that deep.
Goober. Goober.
What's happening, Kirk?
Goofy goobers. I'm bringing it back.
Bringing it back. Hell yeah. No, I'm just streaming and saw you were streaming. I didn't know you were going to have guests on tonight. You texted me earlier saying, hey, I'm actually streaming right when you are and you're premiering your video. And I'm like, oops, I
haven't seen your video yet. What's it about? By the way, I liked your Jones Act video. It was good.
Thank you. It's just another rebuttal video to Robert Reich's latest nonsense. So.
Okay.
I've done, this was my 13th rebuttal to Robert Reich. I now have a playlist. Because people always, hey, can you look at this Robert Reich video? I'm like, he often repeats the same points that I have to address. I'm like, watch all of these first. And if I've not addressed those yet, then maybe.
Yeah, that kid is a goober. You want to talk about goobers? That kid is a goober,
So,
Robert Reich.
Speaking of Robert Reich and language, what are we supposed to call him? Is he a midget or is he a little person?
Well, what's his actual height? There are standards for the height.
He actually has dwarfism.
Oh, so then he's a dwarf, yeah.
Because apparently midget isn't allowed anymore. Which to me, like calling somebody a little person sounds way more demeaning than midget. But like, I don't want to disparage anybody. They were born the way they were born. But like I need the memo on this as far as what's acceptable.
I want to give a quick announcement. It's already happened. Someone said my voice is annoying. So
way to go.
Okay.
But you know what? I've found a new term for Robert Reich. I don't care if he's 2 feet tall. I don't care if he's 100 feet tall. I like to call him an economic fascist, formerly known as a progressive.
Boom.
So we were talking about the F word earlier, the fascist word. Do you think Tucker Carlson is a fascist, Kirk?
I would not he definitely has fascist tendencies. I would probably consider him more of a nationalist, which there's probably a lot of overlap between fascists and nationalists, but
he's also kind of a socialist. So he's kind of a socialist nationalist. I
always call him Tucker Karl Marxon because he views politics in the lens of class warfare.
Yep.
I'm willing to give I think most people have I don't know about most, but many people have nationalistic ideas and tendencies. I'm willing to give I think that in and of itself obviously does not make one a fascist. It's the added authoritarianism for me. I mean, once you start adding in the authoritarian aspects, I'm fascism is kind of right on my tongue, depending on how far it goes.
But he's a nationalist who supports Russia, though. So he's not even really a nationalist. He's just like a socialist who self-hates his own country.
He would say it's in the nation's interest to withdraw from the rest of the world and be somewhat isolationist and invest all that money here in America on infrastructure and taking care of poor or whatever gobbledygook he wants these days. But yeah, the difference between like nationalism, socialism, fascism, it's very superficial. They're all essentially the same. Whatever differences they have are very superficial. So
yeah, like here's the thing: the consequence of him, whether you call him a fascist or not, he supports a fascist empire aiming 8,000 nukes in America. So the consequence of what he does on his show is to support a fascist empire. So.
And doesn't he like to play grab ass with Viktor Orban too?
Oh, and Viktor Orban. And by the way, Viktor Orban is like completely embarrassing because here's the thing: like, let's say you're a really conservative guy out there, and you're thinking like, oh, NATO. There's nobody conservative in NATO. So you have to support Viktor Orban because he's the only conservative in NATO. That's stupid. The leadership in Poland is very conservative, but they're pro-US, they're pro-NATO, they're anti-Russia, and they're pro-Ukraine. Why does Tucker like Orban, but he doesn't like Poland? Well, I got news. It's because he doesn't actually like America very much. He doesn't like NATO very much. He thinks Russia's the good guy. Viktor Orban is a traitor to the alliance. He's a traitor to the Western order. George Soros paid for him to get his college education at the Central European University, and now he spent his entire career letting Soros live rent-free in his head, spiting his former patron and sucking the dick of his new master, Vladimir Putin, as the apprentice of fascism in Europe for Russia. It's embarrassing. If you want to support somebody conservative in NATO, you're better off supporting Erdogan or Poland. At least they support the West most of the time. Hungary's a joke. And it's sad because I'm part Hungarian and I can't even visit Hungary until we get rid of this loser. So
no more politics. You're trying to say something. You haven't said anything in a while. What's up?
I'm just listening, enjoying the.
Oh, I thought you were trying to speak up. Okay.
No, maybe I'm slightly laughing sometimes. It's bring it. But what are you, superpower broadcasting? Well, I can't peg you exactly, and that's not a gay joke. Like,
wait. What am I? I'm heterosexual. I'm a hetero-degenero, as people call me.
Politically speaking.
Politically speaking, well, what do you think I am? Like you haven't seen me before, so what would you say my views are? Because I know what I'm about, but what do you think I'm about?
I don't know. You seem kind of libertarian. I'm not sure.
There are people on my chat on Twitch that are asking about you too, Kevin.
Oh yeah, well I was in your chat on Twitch earlier. Everybody go follow Kirk on Twitch. Everybody, yeah, let's go.
Kirkomania.
Yeah,
hey,
I have no idea really what you are. In some sense, conservative, in some you don't.
Yeah, I'll tell you this. I don't have much respect for libertarians at all. I've spent a lot of my social media career trashing them on Twitter and YouTube and stuff. I'm a liberal hawk. I'm a feminist. I'm a capitalist. I'm a liberal universalist. Basically, I call myself somebody like, you can imagine me as an offensive realist with a moral compass. So I obviously care about the national interest. I care about Western hegemony and everything, but not just because I was born here, not just because those states or whatever. I believe in our values, and I believe that everybody, regardless of where they're born, any coordinates on the planet, any time in the future of our planet, should have the same rights and access to capital markets, private property, liberty, sexual freedom, etc., as anybody born in Canada or the U.S. does right now. And I think that obviously most of what I focus on is international relations and whatnot. But I mean, my foreign policy prescriptions are derivative of my social and economic views. In other words, if I wasn't a liberal and a capitalist, I wouldn't be hawkish for the West. I'd be a supporter of Russia or China, probably. So.
I give you total props for being into international relations. That's what I studied in college. And
I got a degree in it. Yeah.
Oh, I don't have a degree in it. I dropped out because I hated it.
Yeah, I hated the people there, but I stuck through it because if I'm going to be in debt anyway, I might as well have a piece of paper. So,
Kevin is also a huge fan of trains. Like he's a big proponent of trains everywhere across the nation.
That's debatable. We could debate about that. I like debates. I'm also Debate Me Bro, by the way. So if anybody wants to debate me on anything I said today, I like debates. I'll literally schedule a debate. We're booking into September right now. So.
You
But yeah,
know,
sorry if I can just
Mhm.
go back to that about like the debates and changing people's mind. Like, yeah, I honestly think that rarely happens where you have a debate and you don't change the person you're debating, nor do you change really the audience.
yeah,
From my experience, what I've seen is just life experience is gonna change you. I know this. I've seen a lot of this where you meet a partner. That there's this guy that was not vegan. He met his girlfriend. Really fell for her. She happened to be vegan. He became vegan as a result. As a result of that, and later he explained it like, "Oh, it took me a really long time. I had to read books. I had to go through all the reasoning, and I finally got there." But it had nothing really to do with that. Once he fell in love with the girl, that dictated basically his decision, and that happens all the time.
Mhm.
You meet new people in life. You get the feeling component because like I said before, the feeling component is as rational as the reasoning aspect. Human beings, reasoning and feeling are both rational because feelings are going to measure risk, right? If
Well,
you feel,
that's
yeah,
why you gotta have good rhetoric, and you've gotta be able to talk as if you're somebody who's spoken to people before if you want to be in the debate space, right? Because there are
right,
people that will debate Vosh. Vosh is wrong
yeah.
about a lot of stuff. Yet the kids that come on to debate him have no charisma. And so he wins the debates, even if he's objectively wrong on the issue, right? So
yeah,
Right, but I mean, some of this is just basic psychology. Like it's basic psychology. Like the empirical evidence is pretty clear in this. No human is pure reason. It's a mix of reason and feeling, for good reason. Um, and yeah, so it makes perfect sense that nobody would change their mind just because you brought up a really good reason of why. Yeah, the feelings have to be part of it.
well, and you can definitely evoke feelings, though. Like, everybody obviously strives as this ideal for logical arguments, objects of logos. But like, I'll make arguments to pathos. I'll do that all the time. I mean, one that I'll often and has worked. I've actually had conservatives say that they changed their mind after debating me about this. Is the national security? So I'll say, for example, I'm like, oh, really? So you want us to go soft or even try to align with a country aiming nuclear warheads at your family, for example. So it's a very emotionally charged framing of it because I don't know where they live. I don't know if their house happens to be within the direct blast radius of one of the Russian targets. But I find that that's one of the more effective ones that's worked on conservatives before because they don't really sit down and think about, oh, that country I'm big upping is literally wants to aim nukes at my kid and is doing that right now. Like the
Well,
Russians practice nuking my city every few weeks. They go out in the Pacific with their submarines and practice nuking my city, because it's got a naval base at it. And it's like, and now imagine if I was a Russian shill. Is that going to spare me from the effects of that detonation? No, it's not. I would die just as everybody else. So you might as well support the country that wants to stop that has the infrastructure in place to fight that, as opposed to thinking that the horde will spare you because you shilled for the horde. It's like they're not. They're going to kill you just the same. So,
yeah.
If Russia launched a first strike nuclear attack on America, Glenn Greenwald would be sweating so hard because he'd be like, how do I make this America's fault? How do I make this America's fault?
well, he come up with an answer very quickly. He'd say that America deserved it because of its homosexual degeneracy, and then he'd be like, "Yeah, I know I'm gay." So,
I have a question for you, Kevin. Right, superpower.
yeah, Kevin Castley, yeah.
Okay. So I kind of heard this. Heard Ben Shapiro talk about Ukraine. What would be your, like, if someone asked you, right, like let's say, just for the sake, you're an American politician or whatever, what would be your main line of reasoning for supporting like a country like Ukraine that, I guess let's say we were not aligned with at all?
Okay, well, it depends what you mean by support, because I've actually debated against the guy who wanted to set up a no-fly zone there. I don't think we should be sending any troops or anything. I think that would be reckless. But and I've argued against like Evelyn Farkas, who argued for that with respect to Crimea before. What I support is basically money and weapons going over there. And I would say the reason why you want to do it is, funny enough, it's a similar reason why a lot of Putin fans make their argument. It's because we need a buffer in Europe. Now, of course, we need a buffer against Russia. They say they need a buffer against NATO. If Putin were to take Ukraine, not only would that be a disaster, because here you've got a liberal democracy that shares our values and aspirations and everything, that's been slaughtered, war crimes against them, etc.
A degenerate country.
But you've got a country now that is fallen to Russia, which means Russian troops on the border of Poland, not just in the north of Kaliningrad, but in the south too, in large numbers. What next is the buffer? Like, how long then before we come into a nuclear war? So we need, even if you didn't care at all about Ukrainian people, we need a buffer there as a stopgap against World War III to stop the Russian onslaught of Europe, basically, to put them in their place, right? That's what I would say.
So
Sorry to cut you off, but yeah.
Kevin, they're degenerates. They're degenerates, Kevin.
No, they're degenerates. Oh, the guy's doing the guy's slaughtering Bucha. The guy's raping women with their hands cuffed behind their back. The guy's shooting grandfathers with their hands cuffed behind their backs in the streets of Bucha. They're not degenerate. The guy's shelling Ukrainian Orthodox churches on purpose and bombing bomb shelters where they wrote outside in large letters that satellites could clearly see children here. The guy's writing, "This one's for the children," as they fire missiles at the Kramatorsk train stations and kill over 50 people, including kids. Those people are righteous. Those people are great. A country where everybody's either addicted to alcohol or drugs. They're what? They're the morally upstanding folks who shill for a mafia state of 3,000 families who grifted the entire Russian economy for 30 years. Keep in mind, in Russia in 1989, under communism, you made 10,000 American dollars in 2019 equivalent a year. You know what you make right before the war started in 2022, the big war expansion? About $10,000 USD a year, meaning that Russia's so bad under Putin and his cronies that you were economically as well off, literally under communism in real terms. 30 years of growth was plundered. But they're not degenerate. They're not degenerate. We're the degenerate ones because we believe in prosperity and freedom and everything. It's a joke, and I'll challenge this to any of those people out there that say that the West is degenerate or whatever. They can get the flip out. Make like Peter Lavelle. At least he straight up, he put his money where his mouth was. He went to work in Moscow in 1991, and how he married a woman, very hot woman. He found out that she was a liberal, so he divorced her. He puts his money where his mouth is. He doesn't get laid, and he has to live in Russia because he doubled down on his shitty ideology. To all these goobercons out there in the West that call us degenerate or whatever, why don't you do 1/10 of what Peter Lavelle did and actually go and live over there and stop whining on Twitter? You actually walk the walk and go and live under Putin. That's what I would say. So,
you know,
Tell us how you really feel.
I was about to say, like, dude, you are.
you know,
Yeah.
that led me. I asked you that because I think I saw it was I think Michael Knowles or Shapiro brought up something where he said we shouldn't make the same mistake we made with the Iraq War and say we're helping Ukraine because democracy. You know, he said, you know, we should be on the global stage saying we're helping Ukraine because it's in our interest that, you know, if they sustain, you know, whatever with Russia, that means Russia goes down, and, you know, it's in our interest that Russia goes down.
well,
So
I think
but that's
both
not what
those
happened though in the
statements-
Iraq War. you all remember, like if you were around back then, I remember watching the news when it unfolded. The run up to it was about democracy. It was also about the national security and the regional security threat that the Saddam regime posed. Keep in mind, this is a regime that had not only fired Scuds, potentially loaded with chemical weapons at Israel, had also invaded Kuwait a decade prior, which was a Western ally, had invaded Iran, and it was bragging about maintaining a quote-unquote nuclear mujahideen, referring to the 5,000 scientists that Saddam kept around after Operation Opera removed his Osirak reactor in 1988. And so he was definitely intent on restarting a nuclear weapons program, not to mention preserving his chemical weapons. And in fact, he used his chemical weapons on his own population at the Alabja and Al Anfal campaigns. And so with the Iraq war, that wasn't a failure. Iraq is a democracy today. Like that succeeded, but that wasn't the only line of that wasn't the only line of reasoning offered. In fact, most of the arguments up to the Iraq war, if you look at what Paul Bremer was saying, you look at what Rumsfeld was saying, you look at what Bush was saying, and you look at what Rice was saying, and Powell, it was mostly a security-based argument. So
would you say it was bad for Bush to, or any politician? Does this cite their reason for war as, hey, look, it's another democracy and we got to defend
both statements are.
No, because there were people in America that supported the war mostly for humanitarian reasons. Those people should also try to be won over too, because we need as many people as we can get on our side.
So both statements are aligned in our interests. To say that we want other states to be democratic is within our interests. To say that we don't like it when countries violate the borders of other countries without really any justified reason, which is what Russia is doing, that's within our interests. When we make countries like Russia, and let's be honest, like, because of this war, Russia will never be trusted on the international stage anymore. And not only, well, at least within like a lot of years. And then not only that, but they are economically just downtrodden. They're not going to be coming back from this economic downturn for a very long time. So I mean, either statement, either of these things are within our interest. Now, some of those things may be straight up lies, but it doesn't mean that the statement in and of itself is not out of our interest.
Well, Patty, there's a statement that a concept that Strauss coined a long time ago called the noble lie. And I wouldn't say that anything of what you just said was a lie, but I would say even if technically it was, the truth of Russian evilness would merit a noble lie if that's what it took to get the people on board. Now, fortunately, we don't have to do that because the majority of people, the vast majority of people, support Ukraine. But let's say that wasn't the case. Say you needed to say something to get them to support Ukraine. You would be justified in doing so because the evil of Russia, the evil of Saddam gassing thousands of kids is always far worse than telling some people in a democracy something that might not be entirely true to get them to support a good cause. So that's the noble lie.
Well, I'm certainly no deontologist, so I do believe that some lies can be noble. I guess noble is implicitly good. I'm not sure if that statement's necessarily true, but I mean, I get what you're saying. Yeah, I get what you're saying.
What I'm saying is we don't need to be ashamed about being the good guys, right? The good guys need to take pride in it because I'll tell you this, the bad guys, they're proud of what they're doing. Putin is not ashamed of his genocide. So why should we be ashamed in stopping him?
Yeah, I don't think American people are ashamed of being a good guy. I think many American people, especially people who are isolationists or believe that the United States shouldn't be involved in global conflicts, I think that they believe that in fact America is not necessarily being the good guy or just engaging in actions in which take something from Americans. I think that that's what many Americans who hold very isolationist views believe. I think if Americans thought that we were doing the right thing, that we were being the good guy, I think that those types of Americans would generally be in support. Now, I'm pretty sure most Americans are in support of the United States helping the Ukraine fight
80%.
Russia. Yeah, 80% of them are for helping Ukraine fight Russia. But I don't believe that 20% is saying we're not doing the right thing because we're not being the good guys. I believe that they hold that position because they think something's being taken from them.
Well, those people are brain dead, and honestly, most of them,
I don't like
most of
people.
them, and I've seen it, right? Like I run a meme page that we got almost 3,000 followers now. I see these people in the replies every day. Are all of them evil? Are they paid by Russia? No, it's actually a lot worse. They've grown up on a diet of Michael Moore, Abby Martin, and Russia Today and the Internet Research Agency memes, and honestly, they need to be deprogrammed. But we shouldn't take their views at face value, because their views are a product of an enemy regime aiming nukes at our families. A psyop effort going back to the 1990s with Foundations of Geopolitics and Alexander Dugin, which is required reading in Russian military intelligence. And what did he say? He said in the 90s, Russia needed to use the internet to infiltrate the West and turn the open society against itself. And that's what they've been doing. And we're just waking up to that in the wake of 2016. So we're like 25 years behind right now. So
don't you think?
Hold on.
Sorry
hold
about
on.
that, Steven.
I got a $4.99 super chat from Digging Deeper. Thank you. Thoughts on China's collapsing birth rate and aging population? I know you're a Zion fan and agree with his conclusion. It will end them. So the one-child policy has really put them in a bad spot demographically. They have way more men than they do women. And I think you will probably get to the point where I think it's the forget what the magic number is, but the gender ratio, when it gets bad enough, you get lots of angry men, young men who cannot find a partner, and they start to get anxious and they start to get violent. I think that is probably in China's future. What happens after that, I'm not sure. Is it the end of the Han Chinese? Maybe. I don't know.
Yeah.
You know, the Communist Party brought that on themselves with the one-child policy, because the ratio in China of men to women is already skewed. It's about as skewed in reverse as it is in Russia, where in Russia there are way more women than men because of World War II still. And most like they still have a huge disproportionate ratio there. In China, it's about the same, but in reverse. But that, unlike in Russia, where that was a result of the Nazi invasion, in China, that was a result of the party doing it themselves. So that would be peak irony when that happens. So.
Aren't a lot of the family values like applauding China, family values conservatives applauding China because they're trying to solve this error that was created by centrally planning, by essentially offering more welfare benefits to people who want to start families and stuff?
I don't know.
Well,
you know, it's funny
because
doing that.
Well, no, but it's funny because in China, still, even with all those benefits and trying to make up for the damage that they've done, in China, still the culture there, even going up to the party, basically is men are better than women. So they're not actually going to solve the problem by doing that. They're still going to have more men than women. They're still going to abort the women and keep the men. So, you know. So,
Patty, you lived in China for a year. What do you think?
So Chinese culture is, and that's why I love this question so much. Chinese culture is very patriarchal. So it still has I mean, it wasn't that long ago where women were still binding their feet. The people who still live in China today, who are older, are still have bound feet. So Chinese culture, very patriarchal, and China itself, the ruling Communist Party, has really attempted to shave off the feminization of men, what they refer to as the feminization of men. So if you look at like Asian entertainment, especially in like South Korea, Japan, Taiwan, Vietnam, you'll find that like these men in Korean dramas, I love watching Korean dramas and Japanese dramas, but these men are very feminine, right? They have very soft skin, well done hair. They have, bright, shiny teeth. They love to dress nice. And for China was kind of getting into that with entertainment. And what they felt was happening was that communist China was losing their Chineseness. They felt that they needed to go back to being masculine. To be Han is to be Chinese. So that's the identity problem with China and the Communist Party, is that they want to be Chinese, and they don't want to just be Chinese. They want to be masculine Chinese. And so with the one-child policy, they were running into the fact that their infrastructure wasn't doing great. They had to really stop the population growth, because in China, I mean, we're talking about thousands of years of population growth within Chinese countries. People were having upwards to like 10 to 12 children per rural family because of the death rates with children. And now it's, again, like it's just really biting them in the butt. It's unfortunate that people are praising China right now, because China feels like this action is an action that is the right action, while erasing the fact that in order for them to engage in the one-child policy, they had to engage in massive human rights abuses. We're talking about women who had forced abortions in trucks, in vans, literally just driving up to people's houses, being like, you have more than one child, you need to have this abortion right now. In order for China to fix this, what's going to end up happening is they're going to have to either import people, or they're going to have to send people out. And we've actually been seeing this while China is like steadily colonizing Africa. I'm not saying that that's necessarily a bad thing, that China is going into Africa and doing infrastructure and industrialization into certain African areas. Well, I don't know as to the, hold on. I don't know as to the effect of how bad that necessarily is. I don't believe that, like, you're probably going to hate this comment, but I don't believe that colonization in and of itself is just bad. There are some benefits that come with colonization.
Yeah, corrupt politicians get millions of dollars in CCP bribe checks so that they'll improve infrastructure that they can't afford, and put countries like Kenya in 100 years of debt to the Communist Party.
I'm sure that happens a lot in Africa, but just one second. So in Africa, we're seeing a lot of women in Africa who are marrying Chinese men. And many of these women are actually moving into China, especially like rural China. And the Chinese government has taken to using these women and these families as propaganda, not necessarily saying that that's necessarily bad in and of itself. But if you look on places like TikTok, you'll find people like Rose. I think Rose is like from Uganda, and she married a Chinese guy. They have one son together. I think they may be growing their family. I'm not necessarily sure. But China uses this family as an example of, hey, we're becoming more diverse. We're letting more people into the country. We're not just letting more people into the country, but we're accepting non-Chinese people into the country. This is inevitably what's going to happen with China. It's happening with a lot of European countries right now. It's been happening with the United States since like the dawn of first colonization in the United States, is bringing new people into the country. And inevitably, just like it's been happening for the past 50 years, it's going to westernize China even more. China is, in fact, going to lose its communist idealization. It's going to lose the idea of one China. It can't continue. It's not sustainable.
I hope you're right about that.
I hope so too.
And I've been reading.
Hold on. Let Kirk talk, Kevin.
Oh,
what were you saying, Kirk?
Thank you. It's about time.
Sorry, what I said was really long.
That their crackdowns on the tech sector have really screwed them up for the long term, because even though they have started to relax some of those restrictions, there's already like zero confidence amongst the tech sector that they'll be left alone and allowed to like make money because the communist regime might crack down at them. Who knows when?
Well, isn't that essentially what's been happening with their lockdowns? Because first of all, because when they mean lockdowns, they do like real lockdowns. Like people cannot leave their homes, and they've still been doing them.
Yes,
because they have this insane COVID zero policy.
Yep.
Which a lot of people here in the United States looked at with admiration when it first started. Then we realized, then we realized that that was an insane policy, and that lockdowns don't really work, and that Americans are rambunctious and don't like lockdowns. So, so I don't know. China they've obviously done some very impressive things that attract a lot of people, but I think it's unsustainable. And ultimately, the authoritarian nature of their state is either going to implode or destroy itself.
Well, the more access China gets to, I'm so sorry, Kirk, were you about to say something? I heard a huge gasp.
Nope.
Okay. China, yeah, as China becomes more technological, and I mean, the reality is that majority of Chinese people with access to technology are using VPNs. They are not actually they're able to access censored stuff. Like, for example, YouTube and Facebook is censored in China. I remember going to China, like not being able to initially access Facebook and YouTube, and I was pissed. Like I was not ready. I was not ready for being, you know, separated from that. And so I had to access a VPN. I also had to pay for my internet, like straight up pay, even though I was out of college. But like, it was ridiculous, and I think they scammed us. Not gonna lie, but 700 kwai just to get my internet back up was ridiculous. So yeah, they have a lot of access. They have a lot of access to internet. They have you know, people are using VPNs like crazy. People are accessing games, so they're hearing all the gamer words. They're not just hearing all the gamer words, but they're hearing all of the Westerners, right? All the Westerners that are telling them what life is like outside China. And then you have the fact that people who come out of China, 80% of them before COVID stay in the United States. They don't want to go back to China. My first ever roommate in college was Chinese. And then my roommate across from me, no, actually a couple doors down, she was also Chinese. They have stayed in the United States. They don't want to go back to China as much as they love their parents. They've stayed here. And that's what tends to happen with a lot of Chinese students. And those after COVID, many Chinese students went back to China, and now they're coming back to the United States, and many of them, again, are staying. So it's the reality is, if China wants people to stay, they're experiencing massive brain drain. If China wants people to stay, they're going to have to become more Western. And I promise you, like the past 50 years, they have become more Western. I couldn't believe that just 50 years ago, women in China were still wearing qipaos. They were still wearing traditional clothing and, you know, little fancy conservative hats. And the men were, you know, still wearing old uniforms that you usually see in like kung fu movies. That was 50 years ago. And now there were women wearing like punk rock outfits in public. It's crazy the amount of like Westernization that's happened with China. And the Communist Party is like terrified of that.
Do you think, well, to all of you guys and you too, like Stephen, do you think it's hard for that culture to change and it takes so long because culturally, you know, not every Chinese person, you know, I'm sure everyone's different in Asia and parts of Asia, but that a lot of Chinese cultures are very submissive as opposed to, you know, maybe our culture is a little bit more rambunctious about like a vaccine or, you know, something that's telling us what to do.
I don't know a whole lot about Chinese culture. So
Okay.
sorry, I don't know if I can answer your question.
China, the people in China, I think, are less so complacent and more so ignorant. So, and that sounds really bad, like when I say it like that, but let me explain. So, by ignorance, I mean that their political opinions aren't well informed. They're not even, you know, when you're not allowed to express political opinions, your opinions are only going to be like half baked to the effect that of what you've really been exposed to. I remember when I was in China, all around China are these red banners that have propaganda on them. You know, this propaganda says things like "be a good person" and you know, do this, this, and this to benefit your country. I mean, it was very strange because like, you don't really see that in the United States. I think the most people experience that was like Uncle Sam grow your own garden, victory gardens, and chickens during the war.
You get those obnoxious billboards when you're driving down the highway of like, repent and turn to Jesus. I don't know, maybe that's just here in the Midwest. I see a lot of those, but obviously that's not from the government.
Yeah, and you get that a lot. Honor your ancestors. You get that a lot in China on these big giant red banners on top of not on top of, they're like hanging off of buildings and attached to build. And so if you were to go into China and you ask them about Taiwan and you ask them about Tiananmen Square, first of all, they're going to walk away from you. If you ask them about Tiananmen Square, they're not even going to answer you. Second of all,
Really?
you ask,
Wow.
yes, Yeah.
That's insane.
Yeah, I didn't have the balls to do it myself, but they will walk away from you. But in Taiwan, they'll just be like, Taiwan belongs to China. There's no debate about it. There's no conversation about it. It's just Taiwan is China. There's no like, I don't even know how to describe it. There's no like
It's like telling
substance
them 2
there.
+ 2 = 5, right? If you
Yeah,
tell them
it's
otherwise.
it's like telling them that. It's telling them 2 + 2 = 5, and that's that. There is no debate. And that's really like a great deal of Chinese culture. A lot of Chinese culture is very factual. It's like very, this is in fact how this works, and there's no debate about it.
Right.
It was such a culture shock. The other thing with that was relationships with people in China. Oh my gosh. Domestic assault in public, and no one would stop it. It was so strange. It was a strange. Yeah, I watched a domestic dispute while I was walking. It was nighttime, and this guy got into it with his girl. She didn't even say anything. The poor lady was just like very quiet, and he turned around, grabbed her scarf, wrapped it around her neck, and pulled her right up against him. I mean, I turned around and stared at the whole thing. I didn't intervene, and I felt bad for not intervening, but I was aware that people in China can have knives on them. So I didn't necessarily say anything. And when he let go of her, her scarf fell on the ground. And he as he let go of her, he kind of like unwrapped the scarf and it fell to the ground. And I grabbed it and I walked up to her and gave it to her. And I like gave her this look. And the crazy thing to me was that other people were around. You know, I watched people who were sick, homeless, starving. People just walk around. If you gave them money, they laugh at you. The culture in China,
Well,
it was a huge culture shock.
That's not just a cultural thing, though, because that assaulter has the support of the Communist Party. Like, the Communist Party of China is a patriarchal entity, and regardless of how much people talk about Westernization or anything, it is anathema to everything that the West stands for. Anyway, thanks for having me on, Steve. I got to roll out. I got to do Ghoul Gang in an hour and a half with Spooky Nukies, but everybody follow me on Twitch and YouTube at Superpower Broadcasting, and Kevin Castley on Twitter. But thanks for having me on, Steve. It's been good to talk to all you guys. Have a good one.
All right, take care, Kevin. Thanks for coming on.
Peace. Nice to meet you guys. Peace.
Goodbye, bitch.
No, you debate me, Oz. Peace.
Bye. Yeah, so I think someone's very irritated with me making a statement about clothing in China. And they said, let me go back.
I'm irritated with you for paying attention to the chat.
Why? What did I do?
Just people can write anything in a
that's true.
in internet chat.
I'm such a sucker for people's comments, though.
I don't know. I was pleasantly surprised by the comments on my Jordan Peterson video. Like,
oh, good.
I was expecting a lot of from a lot of the Peterson fans, but the self-proclaimed Peterson fans in my comment section either liked the video or just disagreed with Peterson or had like constructive criticisms. But there was one guy who was like, ugh, because I ended the video with like accusing Jordan Peterson of talking out of his ass, which he was. And I used those words. He's like, oh, it's funny how you saved the profanity for the end of the video. It's like, what is your fucking point? Like, what if I had said that at the beginning of the video? Would you say that I'm being brave?
Right?
I'm like, you do get some doozies in the comment sections. Man.
Remember, what's the word? Goober
cons.
Goober cons.
Steven, if I could ask you, man,
what's up?
What would be your response to that question earlier, saying that, if someone asks you straight up, hey, why do you support Ukraine? Are you gonna die on the hill of, hey, they're this democratic people, or are you gonna die on the hill of, hey, that furthers the interest of the West, and that's the only reason I really give a fuck about Ukraine?
I mean, I made that video 2 weeks ago, why Ukraine matters. That was kind of my case to people who think that like liberalism and democracy and Western civilization is a bunch of bullshit, or they don't think it's worth the costs. I think that pulling more nations into the American global order is a good thing, and but I realize not everybody's on the same page. So it depends on who's asking. If they don't give a shit about that, or they think that America's like that the American global order isn't necessarily a thing, I would make the case of Russia is a problem and bleeding them dry during this war is in our best interest, our best national security interests. If I'm talking to someone who's more receptive to the flowery ideological stuff, then I'm going to make that case.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
I would say, like, if I could offer my opinion, it's probably a mistake anytime to die on the hill of, hey, look, we're doing this because we're protecting the democratic state of Ukraine, when that could change at a moment's notice. There's a regime change notice. I'm not saying we shouldn't protect Ukraine because Ukraine has flaws and stuff. We should 100%, but they could be the next state that hey, look, the West helped us, but now we turn against the West.
No, I hear you, but there's also something to be said for international norms. Like a nuclear powered country can't just annex territory like that. Like there's good reasons not to want that to happen. And again, that kind of bridges the gap between the existential national security questions and the flowery Western civilization stuff.
Right. Okay, cool.
What were you saying, Patty?
This is something that I've heard quite often. I'm really curious, who exactly is arguing that Ukraine is like this democratic state?
I mean, they do have much freer elections than, say, Russia.
Certainly.
Or something like that. But I mean, most people know that they're a fairly corrupt country. I've heard, like, you do get mainstream media pundits. I've heard some, like Nick Kristof, talk about how Ukraine is this burgeoning democracy and they need help and they're fragile, and this is exactly the sort of thing that'll set them back. I mean, very clearly they have some serious systemic problems with that country.
Yeah, I think so. That may be the problem, is that like people say that Ukraine is a beginning democracy. We're kind of trying to build them up as a democracy, and there's just like pro-Russia people who are taking that to mean like, oh, you're saying that they're like this great democracy that should be protected, which is just it's a straw man of what people say.
Mm-hmm.
But don't you think it's not our not saying not our, like, agreed, like, expand our sphere of influence, but I don't, like, if we should build democracy in the nation, like, I don't know if that sounds like a good idea.
I
just
think
let them be whatever. After we assist them against whatever the great evil that is Russia.
So I have this really cringe opinion that the United States should be the absolute power.
I agree.
I agree with that too.
So because the United States should be absolute power, the United States is going to align themselves, or other countries are going to align themselves. It's not one way around. It's this way around. Other countries are going to align themselves with the power that is the United States. And it is within the United States' interest, because it's within our interest, to have fairly democratic states that act in ways in which people get to express their opinion as freely as possible. If there are other nations like that out there, we want to be a part of those nations, because number one, it's always good to have a foothold in the West. Always, for us. Mm-hmm. It will always be good to have a foothold in the Asian countries, always. And it will always be good for us to have a foothold in South America and African countries.
Well, there's also something to be said for this. It's not the Iran-Iraq war. Like,
yes,
as flawed as Ukraine is, it's on every front pretty much is better than Russia. So like, I've heard people make this point that like, oh, they have an anti-Semitism and white supremacy problem in Ukraine. Yes, they do. First of all, the problem is worse in Russia. Second of all, Russia is actively engaged in the project of exporting that for their own purposes to other countries.
Yeah,
like they're trying to stir up that sentiment where they think that'll exploit. Kevin talked about exploiting the open society. Well, they're trying to, where there's white supremacy in open societies, they're trying to stoke that. That's not something Ukraine is doing.
Yeah, not gonna lie, but I was like 2 seconds from triggering Kevin about Africa. I was really tempted to do it when he interrupted me, but I decided not to.
I think it's funny because, like you said, it's not like the Iran-Iraq war or anything like that, but it's like it's funny how this is kind of nation building for us. Like if Ukraine becomes part of the West, and I'm not saying that'd be a bad thing. That'd be like glorious. But do we want, like when this is done, do we want Ukraine part of us, or are we just happy that we use
No.
them to beat Russia?
No, we don't want Ukraine a part of us. We want them to be aligned with us. This is not like, this is not like annexing Ukraine. This is not like making
a 51st state.
Right. This is not like making Ukraine a subject, a colony, right? Like it is with what Puerto Rico and some others. This is about a European nation that has potential. This is probably not going to happen, but has potential to join something like NATO. Certainly has potential, right, to be very important in terms of our access to services and goods, commodities. Like, for example, fertilizer. I can't tell you how pissed I am over fertilizer right now, but like this. I tell everyone this. I'm gonna say it again. I'm a farmer. I have a right to be angry about these things. So this is to have access to a country like Ukraine, breadbasket of Europe, is important. And for Russia to have their grubby little hands on it is not going to fly. For that matter, Russia have this precedent that Russia has set with invading countries merely because they exist on your border and you want like some sort of ethno war of conquest is not going to fly.
Right. Yeah.
Well, I love the argument that the Blame America First crowd makes, where they're like, what if Mexico aligned with Russia? It's
God.
If Mexico aligned with Russia and in response to that, the United States invaded Guatemala, there's no chance that these same people will be like, hey, we shouldn't have invaded, but this is really Russia's fault, which is exactly what they're doing in this situation.
Have you heard the Nazis exist in Ukraine, therefore Russia's right to do this take?
Yes.
My God. And it's the same people who align with Nazis on a variety of opinions. I mean, like, and I'm not just saying Nazis like cake, therefore cake bad. I'm talking about like race realism kind of stuff. So
yeah, skinheads.
Yeah.
Like, they have a big problem with that in Eastern Europe. It's not just exclusive to Russia, but like I said earlier, it's probably most prevalent in Russia. And again, Russia is actively exporting that where they think it serves their interests.
Exactly. Do we invade Mexico because of the cartel? No. Why would we invade a country? Why would we accept? Well, is that true? Do we? No, we don't, right? We don't invade Mexico because of the cartel.
No, we cooperate with the government.
We cooperate with Mexico. Yeah, that's true. So yeah.
It's also telling that like our neighbors are not fleeing to our enemies to try and ally with them. Like we've had wars with Mexico before. The Mexican-American War.
Yeah.
We've obviously, that was back in the day, and relations were pretty icy with the United States and Mexico for a while, but now they're our largest trading partner. And obviously, it's not that there aren't problems between the United States and Mexico, but we are friendly nations. Canada, we never technically fought a war with Canada, but in the War of 1812, Canadian colonists fought for the British. So yeah, we have fought with them. And now they're like one of our closest friends. They're a member of NATO.
Right.
Isn't it telling that our neighbors, unlike Russia's neighbors, are not fleeing to join alliances with Russia or China or whoever?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Very telling. Yeah, you know who the good guy is in that.
I was about to say, it's almost like the United States is actually like really easy to get along with, and you don't have to do anything. You just have to like not piss in our shoes.
It's not that the United States is perfect. No one's saying that.
Yep.
Are you reading the chat, Steve?
No, I'm not. No, I know exactly what the response
get that comment.
To this. Yeah, I know exactly what the response is to this. So
yeah.
You know what I feel? It's the dream scenario. I think I asked you this before on Twitter too, Steve. I was like, dream scenario is, Ukraine doesn't win, but Russia cuts its losses, goes back home. They take whatever land that they gained, and we could be done. With the Ukraine, and Russia's collapse is accelerated.
Yeah.
That to me is like the best case. Hey, thank you, Ukraine. You fought these guys for us. We don't want nothing to do with you after this. Russia's collapsing, big, fall off the main stage.
My concern is that just delays the next war. Like, I think if Ukraine actively took back Crimea and the rest of their land, that not only would that obviously prolong the conflict, but and further bleed Russia dry, that would really send the message that they cannot annex territory when they think they can.
Right.
Now, obviously, that's easy for me to say. It's a big difference for Ukrainian people to actively fight for that. I get that they might not want to do that. So I wouldn't be surprised if the Ukrainian top brass brokered a deal with Russia, something similar to what you're talking about.
Mhm.
But again, I think that would just delay the next conflict.
It's the best way out, right? Because I mean, if you're a dying state and you lose this, I mean, you don't want to lose it, So I'm willing to bet this guy, Putin's willing to go at any means necessary just to come out like looking victorious here.
Well, consider it this way: is that Russia is already economically done. Russia is economically done. They have lost all trust with majority of the international community, and this includes China. For any like Chinese shills that are like, except China, no, this includes China. China has never taken kindly to other countries messing up their ability to import goods, not ever. And so this is, as far as I'm concerned, I like, maybe I'm like just petty patty, like maybe I'm just petty, and I enjoy watching Putin sweat. I enjoy watching Russia just economically burn. And so to watch them slowly go through that and then continuously cope like everything's fine in a burning building, there's something like very satisfying about that. Obviously this war can't like just continue. I'm kind of hoping that like Russia will just pull a, hey, we got these specific territories, technically we won, even though they didn't get what they want.
Right. You see, I was thinking like you too, like, oh, it's so great, reading reports every day, seeing, the Ukrainians are just kicking ass. But then you realize if you push this dude, I'm not saying you should be scared of Putin or whatever, but you got a guy who's probably a sore loser. And if he feels like he's pushed up against a corner, then, maybe here comes the missiles.
Well,
yeah, I mean, they do have the largest nuclear arsenal in the world, so
yeah, they certainly do, right? But that's just them deciding to end the world, which I don't. Which either Putin is suicidal, which he's not. I don't think he is, or they're just being very fucking dumb. I don't think that that's what's going to happen. If I think about it this way, I think that China is willing in a heartbeat to align with the United States if Russia were to threaten nuclear action. They'll probably talk to Russia, right? They'll probably be like, hey, dude, you're acting kind of crazy. But if it were to happen, it would signal, as far as I'm concerned, the end of I guess the contemporary modern world as we know it, and kind of usher in like this new era that doesn't bode well for anyone. I don't think Russia is that. I don't think Russian leadership is that crazy. I think what they want more than anything at this point, they may be looking for a way out, but that way out is not suicidal.
Right. Yeah. I always thought, or I heard something very smart from, I forgot who it was on Twitter, but they said, they'll remove Putin from office before they shoot like a nuclear device or something like that. Something along those lines.
I would hope that to
I
be
hope
true.
so.
Yeah, I would hope that to be true. Russia has certainly had close calls in regards to nuclear arms before. And it did take a person who was in the middle step to kind of cease those actions and have a cool head about it. But I'm not saying that you're engaging in what's the word for it? what's the word for it when people are like alarmist. I'm not saying that you're engaging in alarmism, although I have seen quite a bit of alarmism about the Ukraine issue. I don't think that this will usher in. I would be far more concerned about conflicts between that of China and the United States concerning Taiwan, concerning like nukes or bombs or you know, conflicts between the United States and another power. I think China's probably the more of the issue. I think for what it's worth, the United States has enough military muscle to just kind of be like, hey, you really want to fuck with us right now? Like, you really want to do that?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. It is definitely the alarmist in me because, you know, I listen, you know, full disclosure, I listen to Alex Jones just to laugh, but you know, I don't take anything he
They're
says
turning the
seriously.
frogs gay.
Yeah, yeah. But when he gets serious, it's really funny. You know, it's hilarious to me, and it
I
makes me
will
look
eat
at
my
do a double
neighbors.
take at my phone screen because he's like, you know, ladies and gentlemen, this is serious now. I'm like, wait, what?
This is
Like,
serious
the-
now.
you
I
were
will eat
playing
my
the whole
neighbors,
time?
guys.
By the way,
Yeah.
have you guys seen Alex Jones lately? He is like,
Yeah.
you know, for a guy who hates globalists, he is turning into a ball. Like, it's weird. Like, he is massive. He
I
is,
saw the one picture of like when like some stuff was being said. It may have been like I think it was the sentence how much money he owed, and like this picture is him with his eyes like wide fucking open, like just like he looks like someone just like did something horrific in front of him. Like I don't necessarily feel bad for him. I think that
no.
the LARP went way too far.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I have this image in my head of him rolling down a hill and not being able to stop. Help! Help!
Help, neighbors, help.
Globalists.
I'm sorry I said I'd eat you. Help. I love, if you guys haven't looked it up, please look up vocoded I will eat my neighbors from Alex Jones. It is so funny.
So we're coming up on 9 o'clock here. I'm going to bed soon. So can we get some closing words from everyone? Let's start with you, Kirk.
Oh, wow. Put me on the spot. I wasn't ready for closing words.
Kirk was like, I just came back.
Well, I would have liked to say more, but I know, you know, I'm a guest here. I came on late. So I guess all I have to say for closing words is
Goodbye, bitch.
Good to know. Armani, thanks for joining us. What do you got to say?
Yeah, no. Just love the channel, man. You're a cool
Okay.
guy. Thank you for that. Thank you for
No more.
Yeah. Since we're talking about foreign policy, I have a video coming out next week that's about Operation Ajax, the coup that happened in Iran in 1953. Because
cool.
It's very good. I watched.
Oh yeah,
it.
Stephen
Very
is
well
one of the
researched.
few people that watched it. Thanks for the kind
I'll give it a
words.
watch.
Yeah, it's coming out next week.
It's a long one, but it's very well researched. So
about 35 minutes long. Yep.
No more politics. What do you got to say, bud?
Yeah, thanks, Bud, for having me on. It was fun. Learned some new things, and yeah, thanks again, and hopefully we'll chat again in the future.
Okay, Patty, anything you got to say?
Yeah, so firstly I want to say I'm Black, so my opinion only matters half as much today. So sorry, but yeah, no, someone had asked, because I keep looking at the comments, had asked, do I have a YouTube channel? The answer is yes, I do have a YouTube channel, but there's literally like only one video on it. I used to make a lot of videos for like Black conservative commentary, and I don't anymore because I'm quite over it. I really am. And so I'm hoping to get into making more like agricultural content and ag information content, like fighting with vegans and stuff who say dumb shit. So yeah, so it's called Farmer Patty. That's the name of the YouTube channel. You can subscribe if you want to. I don't know why my followers continue to tolerate me since I don't put up videos, but yeah, so yeah, yep. Also, I hope I get to come on tomorrow. This is really fun.
Yeah, I'm gonna do a Q&A tomorrow. So
cool.
I'll be going through those questions. I got a few on my Patreon, a bunch on my YouTube community page, bunch on Twitter. So I'm gonna go through as many as possible.
Are you doing guests tomorrow?
We'll see. We'll see where the where it goes. We'll be in touch. Anyways, yeah, thanks for joining me, all you guys. Thank you, Kevin, for coming on earlier. And I think that's about it. Kirk, can we get one more drop, please?
Yes, we can.
Goodbye, bitch.
Love it.